Kristen Stewart's just entire characterization of Bella is like, she seems like she's gonna vomit every time she has to speak to anyone. Like, she's so afraid of saying any words.
Yeah. But I want to shout out Kristen for this because I think her Bella is immediately more likable. Because that knowing what was going on in that girl's head, I was like, ooh, she sucks. I hate her. Welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show where we talk about fantasy films and the lore that inspired them. I'm Cullen.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we have friend of the podcast and personal friend, Julia Bianco.
Woo! Hello. I'm excited.
You asked for this movie I feel like a year ago. You were like,
yeah,
when are you doing this
one? The second you launched the podcast. I have so many thoughts, and I've had so many thoughts since, what was it, 2010 when it came out?
2008?
Yes.
Yeah, pre-Glee.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different time of the world.
Yeah, it was before gays had rights. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's before gays existed because
yes.
Glee invented being gay.
Yeah. So welcome to Supernatural Romance Month.
Ooh.
So last February, we talked about Beauty and the Beast and like a bunch of different versions of that. And really that story is the foundation of the supernatural romance genre.
Yeah.
Like they're all kind of descendants of Beauty and the Beast. We talked about this movie when we did La Belle and La Bête with the fairy tellers, that there were lots of scenes that gave Twilight energy because he'd be like, I'm a monster.
Yes.
I'm a beast. How could you love me?
Yes.
But it's all in French. And she's like, no. And then when he went like, no, and like jumped in and just like darted off into the woods.
You know what? Much like Edward in this movie, the beast did end conversations abruptly.
Yes.
And you know what? I respect that.
As you know, if you clicked on the thumbnail or the link or whatever, we're talking about Twilight, the 2008 sensation. I would say near and dear to my heart, but I would say it's near to my heart. It is part of my life, whether I want it to or not.
Yeah, honestly, listening to the book, because I listened to the book, I got all the way through it.
I did not.
Watching the movie and then also writing these notes was very, very jarring for me to have to write Cullen's name over and over again, even though I wasn't talking about him.
Yeah.
I felt really bad, honestly. I was like, oh, I feel the pain. I feel your pain.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is my name. So I was not named after Twilight, as people do ask me. I was not born in 2008.
What? You're young. I was just gonna say, you are not that young. Like, this book was written in like 2006 or something, maybe.
Yeah. So I'd be like
that was 12 years after you were born, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would have also been 12.
I would be flattered.
Do people suspect you of being a vampire because they're like, wait a second, you look so young?
And I did get that recently. People do often say, oh, you look really young, or I do get that I look like a vampire. And I'm like, you're only saying that because of my name, and I take that as an insult. I also take when someone says I look like Robert Pattinson, I do take that as an insult. I mean, please tell me my eyes aren't that sunken in.
You have similar hair.
That's what I said.
I was like, you versus like this, like you could do that with your hair.
Yeah. That's it. That's the only. And you could pull that shirt off. You know, you could wear a shirt like that.
I could wear a long sleeve neutral shirt. Yeah.
There you go. I think, aren't you right now?
I didn't plan, but I guess I'm cosplaying Edward a little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Like everywhere, like I get a drink at a coffee shop, people are like, oh, Twilight. Like if I don't say it, someone else will. So sometimes at Starbucks or something, if they're confused, I'm just like, oh, it's just like Twilight. Yeah, it follows me everywhere. I mean, I was in high school when these movies really took off, and I remember working at a hardware store with my name tag, and people would be like, "Oh, you must not like those vampire movies," and I'd be like, yeah, not really," or people know how to say my name, so I do always say I have to pour one out for Stephanie, because now people know how to say my name. People used to call me Colin or Colin. I never got Cullen, and honestly, I get Cullen a lot more post Twilight.
Interesting.
So I do have to give her that, especially because we will be dragging her a lot. So I will give her that.
What would we drag her for, Colin?
What? Yeah.
What negative things could you have to say about
I'm drinking from my
this?
poison apple cup. I'm drinking caramel apple flavored seltzer water or sparkling water.
Gross.
It is, yeah. I also have regular water.
From my Mean Girls the Musical decorative AMC tumbler.
Beautiful.
Check out our crossover with John from Life's But a Song on Life's But a Song, where we talk about the Mean Girls movie.
I would say it's not even a crossover because
we just appeared. We're a guest star.
Yeah.
Though we forgot to talk about how iconic the Carly joke was.
I know we did
when
forget.
He sang iCarly in French. That was hysterical.
Yeah.
Let me just close the door real quick.
Okay. I love this fucking cactus. I love this photo. This is so good. I think that is from.
Who is she from?
Isn't that from the Vampire Suck movie?
I thought the Vampire Suck movie starred the girl from Cory in the House.
Does it?
I never saw Vampire Suck.
Or was she in? No, she was in the Hunger Games parody one.
Okay. Generally, as a rule, I don't really care for movies like that, but I do think this is a funny bit because the cactus she carries is so unbelievably small in the movie, and she carries it for so long.
Well, it's not unbelievably small. Like you can go get like cactuses that small, but it is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like that's what I mean. Like visually, it just looks
visually
weird.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
there's a lot of visually ridiculous things rewatching this film. They just got like one of those like camera arm things that moved, and then they were just like, "We're going everywhere we want to go."
Yeah,
they're having fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't. This will get into my experience. I had only seen Breaking Dawn Part 2. So I'd only seen one Twilight movie. And
like
so I'm
before right now?
Yes. So people will be like, "Oh, it's like act like I'm a Twilight fan." I'm like, "No, I just like had pop culture knowledge because this was everywhere."
Yes.
So you didn't even like read the books?
No.
I didn't read the books either. I listened to the book. I started reading the book when I was in high school, like I think after like maybe the second movie came out, and I started reading the book and I was like, this is terrible. I can't do it. I didn't get past the second chapter, which is coincidentally when Edward started talking, and I was like, nope, can't do it.
I have not only read the book, I have also read all the books. I've also read the gender swapped Twilight that she wrote, and I also read Stephanie Meyer's other work, The Host, which was
I saw that movie.
Book,
I saw that movie.
But yes, I read them like before the movie. I've read them a few times, and now like every time I go to a used book sale, there's always Twilight there, and I'm always so tempted to buy it, and I'm always like, you're not going to reread this, don't buy it. But they're just such like nice looking books.
It is an iconic apple cover. The book does open with a quote about the apple of good and evil.
Yes.
And the tree. And I did try and listen to the audiobook as well. Hannah absolved me because I was like, I cannot.
Yeah, and I was like, if you're gonna handle lore, I'll handle the book. And you know what? I think Cullen, you got the better end of the stick for sure, because you also got my commentary via text
of the book.
I think one of my comments was, if this narrator says laughed or shrugged or grimaced, I was like, if she says it one more fucking time, I'm gonna flip out.
But you watch that movie, and what is Edward's face doing?
He's literally grimacing.
He's drinking that grimace shake.
Dude, there was literally a sentence where she said she grimaced shaking, and I was like, grimace shake, and I lost my mind. I forgot to write that down in the notes. I'm so glad I remembered it right now.
So I tried, I got like maybe a couple hours in, and I would recommend listening to the book for anyone who wants to enjoy the movie, because I hated Bella so much in the book, and then I saw the movie and was like, you're doing good character things. Like, shout out to the team who made this, because I was like, you adapted pretty bad source material like fairly well. They made some smart choices that
Yes.
in the book, I was like, I cannot stand this girl. And I would say it's giving Wattpad or fan fiction, but as a fanfic author, not a Wattpad one, but as a fanfic author, I think that is an insult to fan fiction. Because a lot more happens. And I started listening to Dracula, and this is Dracula's old timey, right? So it's like they're describing coaches, they're going on little racist little tangents about ethnic groups, yet still more happens. Like
Yeah.
old-timey things move slower, but still 45 minutes in, the amount of plot that I had gotten through compared to like 3 things that happened in this girl's life.
She's just
2
a
hours in.
girl. She's a teenage girl. She's coming of age.
You know, I love a teen
not-
drama. I love
Yeah.
teenage stuff, but this girl hates everyone around her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is accurate to like teen angst, but I'm like, everyone is literally, it reminds me of that clip that from Meet the Robinsons where they're like, Goob, do you want to come play baseball? Do you want to come over to my house? And he's like,
Oh.
they all hated me.
What a great reference. So I did not see this movie in theaters. I think I had actually seen the second movie before I saw the first movie. And then I think it was around movie 3 that I started going to the theater with my mom to see it because I didn't care about the books. I didn't really like them, but I did kind of like, well, what's going to happen next? I want to know. Also, I thought Taylor Lautner was super hot.
Yeah.
I was never an Edward person. I agree. The people who adapted this book did a great job. They did actually some legitimate good choices with making sure that the movie had more stuff in it and was moving faster because the book is very slow. It's very focused on the romanticism of their relationship and like there's a lot of parts where he's like constantly reminding her that he's a monster and he could eat her at any second. He's constantly like threatening her and it's very romantic. But it's it's so focused on the sort of the feeling and stuff. It's not very plot focused, which is fine. But to make it into a movie, they did do the Lord's work. Kudos to them.
Yes. I feel like I had one final opening comment. Oh yes, that my journey with Twilight is now parallel to my Harry Potter journey because the first Harry Potter movie I saw was Deathly Hallows Part 2, and then eventually I saw Sorcerer's Stone, and so now the same worked with Twilight. I saw Breaking Dawn Part 2. I did see that one in theaters. I made my friends pay for me to see it because I wouldn't pay to see a Twilight movie. I'm sorry for being a gross man. And then now I've seen the first one.
Our journeys were so different. Before AMC, A-list, and before like Movie Pass, there was $5 Tuesdays at the
Hell
movie
yeah
at my school, and we would go every Tuesday. And I saw all of the Twilight movies multiple times over like every Tuesday for like weeks in a row.
Love that.
But I was a book purist. I don't really remember the book, but I remember being relatively unhappy with the movie. Not like totally, and it grew on me, but I remember like when they were like first releasing the trailer, I was like, this looks so dumb. And then they released like a clip and it was like the apple scene from the cafeteria. And I was like, maybe, but I didn't think Robert Pattinson was hot enough to play Edward. And I didn't think that any of the vampires were hot enough to be who they were supposed to be. So that bothered me.
Yeah, I kind of looked at reviews of the movie on IMDb, and people are not happy about this movie because they preferred the book. A lot of people preferred the book. And I actually wonder if it's because, did you read the books before you knew the movie was coming out, or did you read the book because you knew the movies were coming out?
I can't remember, but I read the book like, because I was a big reader. So I was reading the book like when it was a thing as a book, but I'm pretty sure like it became a phenomenon pretty instantly, and they said they were doing the movie pretty instantly. Like I think it was not that long a wait.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds about right. So I wonder if it could be the fact that like people who read the book or books before seeing the movies would be more purists because you have that in your imagination. But like once the movies were out and then you saw the books, or if you were reading the books at the same time while the movies were out, I feel like maybe that would probably be different, because I imagine that's probably similar for a lot of people who like Harry Potter. Like I started reading the books in high school after like, I don't know, maybe the 6th movie had been out, fifth or 6th movie probably. And so I was using the movie to frame those books.
Yeah.
So That is interesting. I actually, I kind of want you to go back and read the book and then come back to the movie because I found it to be so slow because something doesn't happen until like 5 or 6 hours into the book, and we're like a couple chapters, many chapters in, and so like I feel like
Yeah.
the movie did a good job with pacing.
I don't
I'll give that.
remember my thoughts on that. My main thought was I literally just like looked at all of the vampires and I was like, you were described as being like this stunningly gorgeous person.
Yeah.
And this guy, I thought he was very ugly. I'm sorry to Robert Pattinson. I'm sure he's a nice man, but
I mean, I just said I don't want to be compared to him, so
yeah.
yeah, sorry, Robert. Maybe turn this one off.
Oh, he used to be a big fan and now he's not.
And he seems talented.
Yeah.
Here, but in other things.
Yeah, in the book they do mention something about like, oh, I thought you were Peter Parker or Bruce Wayne, and I went, Robert Pattinson becomes Bruce Wayne.
Ooh.
She got Grimace Shake and Robert Pattinson as Batman. Like, how
Prophet.
is she she's a prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just, I feel we could just do thoughts on the cultural impact forever, but do you want to,
Let's get into this. Okay, so we're talking about Twilight. We're talking about just the first one. It's called Twilight. The rest of the movies I think are called Twilight Saga, and then insert whatever that book title is. But it is based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Just kidding. The book by Stephanie Meyer. The movie is directed by Catherine Hardwicke. I forgot to put an E in her name. Discovered there's an E. She never directed another Twilight movie ever again.
I heard that she asked for more money and then they replaced her. But this is the only one directed by a woman, I think.
That sounds about right. But the screenplay was by Melissa Rosenberg, who did write all of the Twilight scripts, which I think was probably a smart choice for the whole saga.
Consistency.
Yeah, for sure. I think all the movies are pretty consistent. It stars Kristen Stewart as Bella Swan, Robert Pattinson as Edward Cullen, Billy Burke as Charlie Swan, Taylor Lautner as Jacob Black, Peter Facinelli as Carlisle Cullen. Peter Facinelli also played the director of Funny Girl in Glee.
Yeah.
Ashley Greene as Alice, Nikki Reed as Rosalie, Kellen Lutz as Emmett, Jackson Rathbone as Jasper, who distinctly lacks a Southern accent. So let's keep that in mind. Elizabeth Reesers as May Cullen, and then so many other people. I could name them all, but I'm not going
Anna
to.
Kendrick.
Anna Kendrick, yes, as Jessica.
Jessica,
but
yeah.
I wanted to focus on the Cullens in this list because there's just so many fucking people who do appear in the other movies. The only person who doesn't is the one who plays Victoria. She gets replaced by Bryce Dallas Howard. This book made preteen, teen, and adult girls go insane. Why it was called Twihards, which was a word that I had completely forgotten until Cullen had put it into our little script here. I was like, holy shit, that's right. That was a word. Many of my high school teachers and my own mother really loved these books. I think my mom convinced me to see the second one, and then I was like, okay, I'm interested, but I could not get past that first book. The movies also made people go insane too. It made $407 million. The box office was international and domestic on a $37 million budget. So that's a pretty good rate of return.
Yeah.
I didn't see this movie in theaters. I don't know when I would have even watched it, but I did start going to the theater with my mom. I'm pretty sure I saw one of them as a midnight release in high school. I was part of the hype, but I was not in the hype, if that makes sense. We already know that Julia went to see it every Tuesday.
And I did also, I think I saw midnight releases for both of the Breaking Dawns.
Midnight releases were
let me go before that.
Remember midnight releases? Like
now they do like Thursday previews. So there's like no, and then like Wednesday previews.
Yeah.
That's not fun. It's only fun if it's like you're going Thursday night at 11:59 and it's like, I have to go to school tomorrow, but I'm going to see this movie. I'm going to be here till 2:30 a.m. and I don't care. My mom is here, so it's okay.
I think franchises are just different now. They're so sprawling. It's hard. Like there's a new Marvel and Star Wars every 2 seconds. Like you just can't. Yeah. There's not that same level of hype.
Opening weekends aren't even really the same.
Yeah. No. It's really strange. I hadn't really thought about that in a long time, like midnight releases.
Yeah.
There's also apparently a 126-minute extended edition out there that I do not care to watch.
No.
I don't even know what else would be in here because, like, I don't know. They got all the plot that was in the book and then they added some extra plot. Also, I would like to quickly mention that the books inspire the fanfic series where Edward is a dumb billionaire CEO and Bella is a subpar journalist. That was later transformed into the 50 Shades of Grey series. So
yeah.
So we have two things there. And I'm so glad that that's not a fantasy series in the way that like we define fantasy for this podcast, because I could not make it through that.
I do hear those movies are very dull.
I also did try to read that book in high school because it was popular and I didn't know what it was. And I started reading it and I was like, this is bad. And also, this is making me uncomfortable. Like I'm in 11th grade or 12th grade. I'm reading it and like having to journal. Like in my English class, my honors English class, we had a journal about what we were reading.
Oh, no, no, no.
And I purposely was like, well, I can't journal about this because this is uncomfortable. And I just like, I couldn't do it. So
like talking about her inner goddess tangoing while they're having sex. No, I tried. I got through like, I pushed to like halfway through and then I was like, why?
I think
it's
I got
not
about
bad because it's fan fiction. It's bad because it's bad.
It's bad because it's bad. Yeah.
It's bad because it's bad. It's just not, it's not a
unlike
good
Twilight
story.
Which is good. I will stand by it.
Listen, I don't think I would be a fan of the books, especially if the first one is as slow as, or if the other ones are as slow as the first one. Also, I do not like Stephanie Meyer's prose. I think it is bad. Like, I cannot stand it. The movies have this weird nostalgia for me. And I also love making fun of them. But I also like watching them because I think the story is like weird and silly, but I'm also into it. I have a very complex relationship with the Twilight saga.
Yeah, I did want to come in with an open mind. Let's say that I generally, unless we're watching like Pauly Shore Pinocchio or whatever, I'm generally coming into something trying to be as like fair and open-minded as possible. I know like it's very big on the internet for people to just like hate things.
I think
like
you starting to listen to that book helped you open your mind because my mind exploded when I was reading the book. I was like, oh my God, this movie is a genius. And then I started watching the movie and I was like, ooh, maybe not.
Maybe not genius, but like respect.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the background for the movie.
Shout out to my girl Kath. Yeah. Also, okay, so I at work, because of this, I do icebreakers for one of the meetings, and I did like werewolves or vampires. And I am team werewolf, as anyone who watched our Monster Prom episode knows.
Yes.
Scott Howell and then the Teen Wolf show. Even though Dylan O'Brien is the best character and he is not a werewolf.
Styles is great.
Yeah, but
Styles doesn't have any superpowers. All of his friends do.
And that's what makes him
cool.
Spoilers.
By a demon for a bit.
And that was a great season.
That's right.
That was fun. Yeah.
That was peak TV. True. Are we talking about lore now?
Let's do that lore.
Okay, so Hannah had this wonderful idea. She's like, what if I write down like what Stephanie establishes about vampires and we go into the history of those things. The flaw with this idea is that Stephanie does not get this from anywhere. It's that it's really, she just makes shit up. And so there's not a ton of lore that I can go into about. We're going to talk a lot about vampires, but like with the Twilight specific is pretty much like her own invention. But so in Twilight, there are these beautiful, pale, she was very insistent that they only cast white actors, immortals with lust for blood that is not quite, unlike Debbie Ryan, it isn't quite insatiable. They can get over it. Carlisle works at a hospital, which we're gonna get into sexual metaphors. They each have
okay. Thank you for the warning. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah. They each have special superpowers. Like,
well, not all of them. Most of
Edward can read minds.
Alice can see the future.
Can
Jasper
see version of the future.
Can kind of like mind control or emotion control. Bella, we'll find out, has a power. Still can't quite nail down exactly what it is. And then there's other
Emmett's
people.
Just that he's like strong.
But aren't they all strong? So that's the cop-out.
But Emmett is
power.
like extra strong, and I don't know.
He's a monkey man. That's what Rosalie says.
Oh, she does. There's a few monkey references in this.
Spider monkey.
Yeah. A shockingly lack of monkey references in the book, though.
Yeah.
And so
Melissa Rosenberg creation.
I lose a little bit of respect for Ms. Rosenberg. Not gonna
lie. In order to die, they have to be ripped apart and burned. They sparkle like diamonds in the sunlight.
But they do also burn eventually in the sunlight.
Okay.
Like they will get set on fire as established in I think in New Moon. I don't know. At some point,
we
like
haven't
Edward
gotten there
almost
yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that is part of the lore.
Yeah.
It's just not ever discussed here.
Yeah.
And then their eye color is connected to when they last ate and what kind of blood. So like drinking animal blood creates golden amber eye color, where human blood creates deep red. There's a lot of people claiming to be vegetarian in this, and I'm like, Bambi would have different thoughts. Say this as a pescatarian, so I can only throw stones. I have a semi-glass house to throw stones from. Like Ariel would still not like it. So what is a vampire? As we will learn, as we every time is always like, what is this? Well, it's hard to define because it meant a bunch of different things, just like trolls, elves, fairies, dwarves, anything. So it's an undead thing that eats blood or corpses or the living. It's hard to trace where it began. There were Egyptian demons that drank blood. Ovid referenced sturges, which were in Roman culture, and it could mean vampire or demon or witch. The Golden Ass, that book, do you remember that from Cupid and Psyche?
I do.
And Beauty and the Beast, yeah, they reference vampire-like beings.
Mm.
This is Valentine's Day is actually Cupid and Psyche's wedding day.
Cute.
Fun fact I just made up. Actually, let's see. Because I'm sure you could tell people this is the ancient origin behind Valentine's Day. And they would, if you said in that voice, they'd believe you. So, okay, now jump ahead to medieval Europe. So there are references to these German ghouls that are like shroud chewers that like chew their shrouds. Because a lot of this is people unburying corpses and being like, why they do that? So they eat their shrouds. So you would put a brick in their jaw to stop them from chewing things. Because it was more like at this time it was thought that the dead could like send bad vibes and like send plague and stuff from the grave. They weren't rising. So you had to bury them and put the brick in or do whatever in that region was the tradition to stop the bad vibes. In 12th century England, we got a lot of people, a lot of historians like Venerable Bede. We know him because he's the one person that referenced the goddess Easter. They talked about revenants, not the movie, but these beings that would come back from the dead to terrorize their family. And usually it's because they had disrespected the church or God by not tithing or doing a sacrilege. A rabbi wrote about one that it was because like this woman was very uncharitable, like she didn't help the poor, and then she became a vampire-like thing. In order for their families to not be attacked by them, they would have to have like they'd have to go to their clergy, and they would do like a Jennifer Love Hewitt and like absolve them of their sin and like send them into the afterlife. So that those are revenants. And then we actually with Josh, Julia's boyfriend, when we talked about Diablo, we mentioned this. Demonic things also had their sexy side at this time. They were the hot incubuses that were sex demons, and they would collect sperm from nocturnal emissions and use them to impregnate human women and witches with demon babies. So like sexy evil was a thing. So sometimes if like a baby was born with teeth, people are like, that's a vampire demon baby. Vampire like undead things were around, but like they all have their time. So like werewolves were really big in the 16th century, the 1500s, burning and killing your werewolves. And then the 17th century is like witch hunts, and then those were bigger in Western Europe. Then Eastern Europe got really big into vampires in like the 18th century. And so people were writing about it. The Sera sur les apparitions des spirits et sur les vampires ou les revenants de Hongrie de Moravie and so by an Augustinian monk was a famous book that talked extensively about vampire attacks. Because other people were like, vampires, that's nonsense. But people were really big into it. You would like have to dig up their corpse and like cut off the head or the heart to burn them. Or you would stab them with stakes. Aspen was popular because it was believed Christ's cross was made from aspen. Holy things in general, like crosses. Shout out to this cross that Rafa got me in Mexico. And I'm like, this looks like something you would use to fight a vampire. Like,
absolutely does.
Crosses, rosaries, holy water, consecrated ground. Daylight was added later as a more non-denominational one. So it was like garlic was already kind of a ward against evil spirits because, garlic A gives you bad breath, but B, like, if you've ever had super tonic, which is like a granola mom thing where you like make all these peppers and garlic together, like it can be like an antibiotic. It can clear out your sinuses. So it could fight off sickness. So it was already it's just a general like, oh, garlic is good to fight off bad vibes. So okay, for vampires. Silver, I've mentioned this in the past, and I think I was incorrect. I'm trying to find my sources, but they say Judas from the Lady Gaga song was the first vampire. And so you fight things with silver because it relates to his betraying Jesus and his appearance in the Bible. But that could be Anne Rice who made that up. I
That
see
sounds.
it written, but I don't know if I can confirm. They couldn't see in mirrors or cast shadows because they didn't have a soul. And sometimes they could shapeshift into different animals. And so usually these vampires would arise from their grave and they would harass their own families, like their husbands, their wives, their children. So these were peasant vampires, like normies that were just rising from the grave. And so people would be unburying corpses and burning them and doing all this stuff. And eventually the authorities were like, people need to stop desecrating corpses. So like the Pope forbade it. Empress Maria Theresa, mother of coquette icon Marie Antoinette, was like, this is dumb. You need to stop. You will all get fined, and the priest will be fired if you do this. So leave the corpses alone. She famously got some of her daughters sick by praying too close to the corpse of her other dead daughter.
Oh.
So, and then there are nobles that people will often say are the origin of vampires. Like you'll get Elizabeth Bathory, who they say bathed in blood, or Vlad the Impaler. Vlad was called son of Dracul, which could mean son of the devil, but it means son of the dragon because his father was part of a noble order called the Order of the Dragon. There is evidence that, like, so if you ask some, Vlad is a national hero. If you ask others, he's a genocidal war criminal. So there's that. And then Elizabeth Bathory, it's like there's evidence that she was a sadistic serial killer who tortured servant girls and young noble girls, or it was a witch hunt against a powerful female landowner who was Calvinist by Lutherans and the Catholic Habsburgs. So like there's evidence, like there are historians on both. So it's not like this was 100% a witch hunt, but like there's people who argue both things. Some people say there were over 300 witnesses, that's enough, and then other people are like it's all made up. So, before we girl bossify someone, I'm just gonna say, who knows? Some people, especially rich people, can also be shitty, but also people do demonize women. Who knows? Vampires were also sometimes connected with anti-Jewish stereotypes, like blood magic and kidnapping children. Very classic Europe. To reference Glee, there was that scene where Santana's like, I blame Rachel. And she's like, what did I do? And it's like, oh, you must have done something. And that was very much the attitude Christian Europeans had against the Jews. Whether or not they really had anything to do with what just happened, they're like, yeah, it's your fault. But that does lead to, you get a lot of people on the internet who will talk about anti-Semitism and mythical creatures in takes that remind me of the recently trending that if you kick all the Latinas out of this country, who will be cleaning your toilet, Donald Trump? And then the other host on The View is like, no, because people be like, look at that ugly little freak. Obviously Jewish coded. And you're like, okay. That's interesting. That's your first thought.
Oh.
Is that as woke as you think it is? I don't know.
Vampires are also always like an interesting monster because they're like the most human looking. And so it's easier to feel like how people came up with that as opposed to like who came up with like trolls. I guess trolls also kind of look human. That's not a good example, but like vampires were always like they can live among you. And so it's like very easy to just like tie that to suspicion and mistrust that everyone just has.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why they were able to fit with like werewolves and witches. People were like, they're among us, and the same with vampires. So that's just like a rundown of pre-literature lore. And I actually found a Romani story that I read as a kid, and like was seared in my memory. And I had to do some weird Google searches to find it. So this Romani story is called The Vampire. And it starts off, this is a loose retelling because it's very told in very colloquial language, but I'm modernizing it. So there's these cute peasant girls. There's one named Nita. She was healthy, she was strapping, those are the words. Very cute. She was the daughter of wealthy peasants, and there was an old woman in her life in some capacity, unclear, but this
Love
old
that.
woman would allow her to fuck at her house. So, so the all the other girls had sweethearts, but then she was alone. But then one handsome young spark, one handsome lad came and started dancing with her. And so they went to the old woman's house and they went to bed together and kissed and fucked. And then the next morning, the old woman's like, wow, look at that cock. And she's like, what? Excuse me? And it's like, oh, he had like cock's feet and he left when the cock crowed. And he just like, okay, grandma, let's get you back. And then the same thing happened the next night, except now the old lady was like, he had horse's feet in the morning. And she's like, that's suspicious. So the next time they fuck at this woman's house, the Nita ties a thread to his shirt. So when he leaves, she can follow him and she sees him. I read a version where it said he ate a corpse at the graveyard, but she just sees him go to sleep in the grave in this latest version. And she's like, ooh, okay. So she ghosts him. She does not go to their fuck palace at the old lady's house. And he shows up and he's like, where's Nita? And she's like, I don't know. And then he goes to her house because he knows where she lives. So he's like, what did you see? Tell me or I'll kill your dad. And she's like, I didn't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, stop talking to me. And then next morning, her dad's dead. Same thing happens the next day. He's like, I'll kill your mom. What did you see? And she's like, I didn't see anything. Kills her mom. And then she's like, and he's like, he's like, I'm coming for you next. She's like, okay, fuck. And so she's like, she has 12 servants, and she's like, hey, she puts together her will and she donates all of her money and all the stuff to the servants. And she's like, when I die, please bury me in the forest next to an apple tree, or this is going to end badly for you. And they're like, okay. So then her boyfriend shows up, kills her when she says, I didn't see anything. And she's buried by the servants, by the apple tree. And a beautiful flower, the most beautiful in all the land, grows on her grave. So then, like half a year later, there's like a prince who's hunting, and his dogs see the flower and are like barking at the grave. And he's like, that's a beautiful flower. And he plucks it and brings it, puts it in a vase, puts it in his bedroom. And that night, the flower turns into a beautiful woman. Nita is back and she kisses and caresses him, but he's asleep. He doesn't know it. And then she goes back into a flower. And the next day he's sick and he says, Mommy, my head hurts me and my shoulders hurt me. And she's like, So the queen consults a wise woman and they feed him and he starts to feel better. But same problem the next night. And the king is like, I blame this flower. So they wait and they see what the flower does, and then the flower turns into Nita, and they're like, she's hot. She's the most beautiful woman we've ever seen. So they wake the prince up, and he's like, wow, she's hot. They all grab her, and then the prince and her lay down together in bed and have sexy times. So now curse is broken. They get wed. They have a big party. Everyone is like, she is so hot. And they have a beautiful baby boy. But then her ex, who had sex with her and then murdered her, heard, and he was like, she can't be happy. Let me ruin her life. So then her murderous situationship shows up, and he's like, what did you see that day in the churchyard? Tell me or I'll kill your baby. And she's like, I didn't see anything. So he kills her baby. And then she buries her baby in the churchyard. And the vampire shows up and is like, tell me what you saw or I'll kill your husband. And she's like so fed up. She's like, God burst you. And that works. He gets so mad he explodes. And there's blood everywhere. And she gets her father-in-law and she's like, cut out the heart, cut out the heart. So he cuts out the heart and gives it to her. And she goes to unburies her baby, touches the heart to him. Baby comes to life. She does the same with her parents, brings them all back to life. And she told them how this vampire made her suffer. And that's how the story ends.
Wow.
Yeah. So this story always connected with Twilight in my mind because he's a controlling, abusive boyfriend who wants to control her life and can't see her be happy with anyone else. And to me, this encapsulates what vampires represented as like they were also a sexual threat,
Mm.
They were associated with sexual deviance. And so they were like a masculine, violent sexual threat compared to other things that were just attacking you. You know, like there was a sneakiness. And I think that's very interesting how they're rehabbed. So speaking of that, let's talk about literature vampires. So we may have heard of The Vacation, where Mary Shelley invented Frankenstein to spite Lord Byron. On said vacation, there's a leftover short story that Byron wrote about a vampire, and his like fanboy, who also was his doctor, picked it up, fleshed it out as a whole novel, and he made the vampire a caricature of gothic sad boy Lord Byron. So it was like a roast, and it became wildly popular. And this is how vampires went from peasants to fancy aristocrats who are wealthy and well-bred, refined, and fashionable. And he made the vampire fashionable because in Dracula, which came out in 1897, which is, I would say, 108 years before Chicken Little, Dracula's badly dressed. So it's kind of they came out at the same time. The characters have kind of been conflated. But Dracula could climb on the wall like a lizard. He could shapeshift. He could feed on living humans to make himself younger, often kidnapping babies. He can't be seen in mirrors. He's invulnerable to weapons. He's connected to the earth of Transylvania, like his native soil. He has 3 wives. This is going to be important when we talk about Mormonism and Stephanie Meyer. And blood makes him younger. His eyes flash fiercely. His eyes change color and flashiness depending on his mood.
Mood ring eyes.
Yeah, mood ring eyes. He has magical power. He can control wolves. He can control mist. He can shapeshift to different animals. Everything about him is very sexually charged. The deviant sexuality, because there's people believe that Bram Stoker was dealing with gay issues, gay internal stresses when he was writing this, and you see that with the main character Jonathan Harker. Is like there are lots of him being grabbed by Dracula, or like he passes out and Dracula carries him to his bedchamber and undresses him for bed, and it's like, oh, in a
There's
different
a little
context,
gay
this could be
happening.
hot. Yeah, I could see. And there is actually a new musical right now, I think, starring what's his name? The Tiny Newsy. It's a Dracula musical.
Yes.
Andrew Jimmy Bolger? He's in it.
Yeah.
He's the Jonathan Harker character, and Dracula is deliberately very sexy, kind of a Frankenfurter energy. So that's Dracula, and also a few years before in 1872, Sheridan LeFou, an Irish writer, wrote Carmilla with an aristocratic cat shapeshifting lesbian vampiress. So they also represent a deviant sexuality, a gay sexuality, a polygamous sexuality. So this is where we're getting vampires, but they're always evil. They're associated with death. But then in 1976, Anne Rice releases Interview with a Vampire, which takes vampires from like a vile embodiment of lust and immorality to something kind of tragic and sympathetic. This is where we get a big shift in how we see vampires, which is interesting because you know who else got a cultural rehabilitation? The Mormons. So before we get into this, I mean, as a Catholic, my religion comes up a lot because we get ourselves involved in a lot of lore. We're lore whores. We had opinions on vampires and fairies and werewolves, So I roast my own religion quite a bit. Now, I am not Mormon, so I definitely want to be respectful. And I did research. So this isn't here to drag current day Mormons or, we're just going off of like doctrinal things, how they relate to this franchise specifically. And I did read an academic article about it because I didn't feel comfortable just like, yeah, this is what I know. So Mormons in American history were not well liked. They're often persecuted for their religion specifically because of polygamy, which was a deviant form of sexuality. This was often portrayed in like political art of like their, preying on women and girls. And, as we often know from more recent situations with these polygamous sects, that often is not a great environment for women and girls. And that's a very polite way to put it. So that's pretty valid. But in the 2000s, especially as Mitt Romney was becoming a presidential candidate, they really went through, they did a whole campaign and they were trying to project an image of American wholesome family values. So like we're just like your average American conservative Christian. Polygamy had been outlawed for a long time since Utah could be a state, because that was a big, people did not want Utah, where the Mormons lived, to be a state because of polygamy. And then some Mormons did separate, and the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is very clear that they are not considered members of the Latter-day Saints.
Right.
But they were still, even when Utah became a state, they were not super popular, especially because Black Americans were not allowed to have full membership until 1976. Now we get the Cullens. They're this perfect white cultured people who practice abstinence. They play baseball. They're wealthy. They're a close family. They're pillars of their community. They follow traditional gender roles. There's the vampires are associated with sexual deviance in the past, but these people, they can control their lusts, their desires. They're model citizens. They're so wholesome. So this deviant thing is now representing American white wholesomeness. And so this author, which I'm going to reference him later, connected this with the rehabilitation of Mormonism in American public culture. Also, the concept of an eternal life, that they're together forever. This beauty and marriage reflects eternal marriage as a Mormon doctrine. Because you remain someone's wife even in the afterlife. And I believe it's taught that women whose husbands don't make it to heaven then become someone else's wife, which is different because a lot of your average Christian denomination will focus on the parable or the story where Jesus says there's no male or female in heaven. But yet, I don't know, I feel like your average transphobic, okay, we know what I was going to reference. People seem to ignore that part. But let's talk about the werewolves. We have Jacob Black. Jacob. So the Mormons believe the indigenous people of the Americas are Lamanites of the house of Jacob. So that he had 2 sons and one was evil. And so they are cursed with, his descendants are cursed with blackness. And they're considered lazy and immoral, but their eyes can be lifted from the darkness. And this was often seen in school programs that they had for Native Americans who they saw as Lamanites. And they're more white and more productive than the people on the reservations.
Yeah, his name in the book and movies is crazy in this context.
Yes. And this, unlike the teachings on Black Americans, is still official church doctrine, and some scholars who just said it shouldn't be were excommunicated. Here we have dark-skinned werewolves who are not classy like the vampires. They're poor, but they also have close familial relationships, which is a Mormon value compared to Gentiles like the Swans, who have a failed home life with divorced parents who's a single child. So it could be in a way positive representation. And this is all from Vampires and Werewolves: Rewriting Religious and Racial Stereotyping in Stephanie Meyer's Twilight series. So it was an academic sources kind of thing, because I was not an expert in Mormonism or its teachings, but I had seen things thrown out on like TikTok about some of this stuff. Right. So I was like, I want to like find an accurate source. Speaking of TikTok, the If Bella Had one real friend in Twilight series is hysterical. And then the Quileute people are also referenced in the Twilight franchise. They are a real tribe that lives in Washington, and Stephanie and the Twilight franchise use their beliefs in a very bastardized way, reflecting kind of Mormon settler colonial views with their relationship with the vampires, making up lore about pale faces. There's no reference to vampires in Quileute myth, which, makes sense, but wolves are sacred to them, as well as whales, fish, the weather. I got this from Burke Museum. They had a whole section on Quileute culture. Because again, not an expert, but those concepts are given equal credence to wolves. So like wolves aren't like they're special, we just love wolves. Though their art was also used, kind of appropriated to create the tattoos that appear later in the franchise. In Twilight, the story is they were turned into wolves to defend their lands. But in their creation story, Quileute the Transformer turns wolves into the first humans of the tribe. So this is like how Odin in Norse mythology makes Ask and Embla the first man and woman from ash and elm trees. And Prometheus, or the Abrahamic god, make humanity from clay. So it's very much the story they tell about these people is a reverse of their creation story. which is one of the main issues that they draw, other than the fact that their culture was used, but they don't make any money from it. But that to take their sacred creation story and just reverse it to fit, oh, they're going to be shape-shifting wolves. They didn't love that. So that's all the lore for today. That's a lot. Some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. When I was reading through that a little bit, the Jacob Black thing kind of was crazy to me. That like that his name is literally Jacob, like House of Jacob, like connection with the evil, and then the blackness, his last name is Black. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And wasn't he initially not supposed to be like a love interest?
I don't know.
I feel like I
Actually.
remember reading somewhere that like it was not supposed to be
A love triangle.
yeah.
That's interesting.
I feel like though she was always Edward was the number one.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
feel
yeah.
when we talk about love triangles,
Yeah. It wasn't a super like back and forth love triangle.
yeah. I feel like there's very few that are in literature the same way TV is, because I know people often reflect on like Katniss Gale Peeta,
Mm-hmm.
and like Katniss wasn't really. It wasn't a love triangle in that very obvious way.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was thinking of Hunger Games because these two franchises are often connected, because I think people like to hate on things that teenage girls like, and so that's why I was saying I wanted to come in with this with an open mind. But I do think Hunger Games is just like so well written and such an interesting view on society. Twilight was very big, and part of it was because it had I forgot to mention this, a pro-abstinence message, especially if drinking blood is connected to like marriage and controlling yourself or like sex and like it's all, so that's why parents felt comfortable with Twilight, which I wonder how Stephanie feels about 50 Shades, but yeah, it is an interesting, it is an important cultural touchstone. We're talking about the history of vampires and what they mean to us. And I did not expect it to connect with the history of Mormonism. And I always knew she was Mormon, but I didn't expect that connection to come up.
Yeah.
There's another good TikTok series where someone goes through and looks at the descriptions of Bella's outfits because they are horrendous. I think a lot related to Stephanie's own personal style, but it's a lot of like floor length denim skirts, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I'll have to not go back. I'm gonna have to find the TikTok series.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
It's wild.
Which, to be fair, was very big in my homeschool community. And so I do associate floor length denim skirts with Mean Girls. This is a whole tangent, but like the dressing thing and policing how girls dress was such a part of the culture that always weirded me out because it was essentially used as a bullying tactic. And I remember being at homeschool prom and my group was late. So there were chaperones. We had to sit at the same table as the chaperones, me and my three friends. And these moms were pointing out each dress that they thought was inappropriate. And I remember thinking, as a boy, as this horny, uncontrollable teenage boy, allegedly, if this is all for my benefit, wouldn't you not want to point out which ones are too slutty to me?
Right.
Like, even if it wasn't directly to me, like you're doing it right in front of me, I can obviously hear you.
Yeah.
So it to me, it's always so much more to do with like the shaming than with like.
Well, I mean, the just shaming.
The whole premise of like to protect it's still like I don't really agree with that premise, but even if it is, like it's not really in service of that premise.
No, it's shaming both the girl who's wearing that and the boy who's ogling at her. Like the whole thing is shameful. So it's like shaming both sides.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's talk about Twilight. So I'm gonna be going through the plot summary today, friends. Normally this is Cullen's job, but since I listened to the book and watched the movie, I get the privilege of doing this. But I'm just gonna go through it. All right, let's start with we're flying over the woods. There's a deer. We're watching it, and Bella's talking about how she never thought about dying, but now she is. And there's a deer being hunted, and then boom, it gets snatched by a humanoid-looking figure. So Bella's leaving Phoenix. It doesn't really look like Phoenix to me, but
that looks like Palmdale or Santa Rosa. Yeah.
I imagine it's probably something like that.
It is
Um,
California for sure. Yeah.
yeah, and I think the rest of it's probably filmed in Canada.
Yeah, I
Um,
think Vancouver.
yeah. I mean,
That's where
that's
everything's
north of
filmed.
Forks, you know.
Riverdale, Once Upon
Oh,
a
I think
Time.
weren't parts of Twilight actually filmed in Forks? You can go to Forks and take a Twilight tour, but they might have like recreated some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably
There is,
some stuff, but I think the majority of like the film itself was probably shot in
yeah.
Vancouver,
But
which
there
yeah.
is the Twilight Museum in Forks, right?
I have a
That's
friend who
just
went on a whole like 3-day Twilight weekend in Forks.
I love
They've made
that.
the whole thing out of it.
I
Good for
mean,
them.
good for them. Good for
Good
that
for them.
tourist board. Someone knew what they were
Seriously.
doing.
Seriously. So Bella, she's leaving Phoenix and she's leaving her mother and her mother's minor league baseball player husband, Philip, behind. And she arrives in Forks, Washington in the middle of March, which is in the middle of the second semester,
Mhm.
which in the book, Bella actually arrives at the beginning of a new school year, which probably makes that whole transition to a new school a lot easier. So, yeah, that's just like one little difference there. When they're in the car, you know, she got picked up by her father, Charlie, who's he's chief of
He's
police because he's not the
yeah.
sheriff. So they have a very quiet, strained,
Mhm.
and estranged relationship. They barely talk in the car, but I feel like that's pretty different from the book because I don't feel like they were as awkward. I mean, like her inner monologue is not very nice to him,
No.
but I do have to say I do love Billy Burke as Charlie in this series because he is fantastic. Chef's kiss. But yeah, so he bought stuff to decorate her room, like the store lady picked it out and
Yeah.
he's so
He's
awkward.
like, you like purple, right?
And she's like, "Purple's cool."
I feel
That's my
like
impression
he's
of
not
Kristen Stewart.
even that awkward. Kristen Stewart's just entire characterization
Yeah.
of Bella is like she seems like she's gonna vomit every time she has to speak to anyone. Like she's so afraid of saying any words.
Yeah.
But I want to shout out Kristen for this because I think her Bella is immediately more likable. Because that knowing what was going on in that girl's head, I was like, ooh, she sucks. I hate her. Like
I think
she
I think Kristen Stewart's Bella is a blank canvas, whereas the Bella in the book, like she has the inner monologue.
and I don't like it.
Yeah, so I think like
Which,
yeah,
yes, female characters don't always have to be like nice. Like you can have
right.
edgy characters, but also she's so mean about her dad with very little reason because it's like he seems to be really trying. And so the movie translating it as just hey, they're really awkward. Like it's they didn't spend a lot of time together. It makes it much more sympathetic. Like it's like oh, like
Yes.
she's awkward. Like she's just an awkward teenager.
Hmm.
Uh, and like she's trying. She's like yeah, purple's cool. Like she's like awkward, but it's like it's like okay, she's just doing her best. Like I can sympathize with her a lot more. I can feel bad about what her life's going to turn into by this through this franchise. Whereas this Bella is so disdainful of Charlie and really everyone. I know a lot of people say you realize you're an adult when you side with the parents in Disney movies. I
Right.
still do not. I do not side with King Triton. I side with Ariel. But in this, I think her dad is hot. I was like, okay. He's the
Okay.
hot one. He's the hot one in this movie to me.
Yeah. I respect what Kristen Stewart did because she clearly created a character and then played that character very consistently through 5 movies. It is not
true.
how I would have created that character.
Right.
I think that she and Edward have like no chemistry because they're both
Yeah.
so awkward.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
because they're in biology. Yes, I got the chance to say that joke.
Yeah, but again, I think that she did acting because she picked a character and she played that character and
Yeah.
she has played other characters. We know she can. And obviously it was written that way too, but I'm just like, it seems like she is like, has visceral fear every time she opens her mouth just to say, like, can I get a burger? It's like, I feel her social anxiety too strongly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like Bella in the book, I think she comes off a lot stronger because we do have her inner monologue. And so like there are times when in this movie I was like, wow, I wish I could know what Bella was thinking because like I don't care for the way she's being played. But then again, like there are other times in the book where I'm like, please stop thinking. Like I cannot stand you.
I also love
Yeah.
when she makes enchiladas in the book. There's like nowhere else to talk about this, but there is a lot of emphasis on her playing a traditional
Cooking.
female role.
Yes.
And her making enchiladas and like it being so foreign because they don't have good Mexican food in Forks, Washington.
Yeah.
I just needed to mention that.
She doesn't cook in this movie at all.
Because they're
They
trying
go to the
to
diner.
they're trying to mainstream it
Yeah.
for your average American audience.
Yeah.
But the Cullens cook for her, and I don't think we ever get an answer on if she's Italian or not. They're like, she must be. Her name's Bella, but it's never told.
I could do a whole episode on just that scene. Okay, let's keep going because we need that scene.
Okay, so Charlie buys her a truck from Billy Black, and this happens like basically like the second day she's there. It's like the same day she's going to school for the first day.
Weird foreshadowing with the truck too, where they're like the brakes don't really work, but then that never comes up.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's strange. I noticed it this time because I was like, oh yeah, then there's the car accident thing later. And then I was like, wait, no, that's not her car.
That has nothing to do with her car. Yeah, that's really weird.
Also, her reaction to getting the car. In the book, she's like, I guess this will do. It's really loud. And this, she's like, oh, cool. Like, because she's a teenager who got a car given to her.
Yeah, literally. Like, she's probably what, like 16? Like, this is her first car. Like, I think in the book, she does show it a little bit more love, like, as she gets used to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, her reaction was like, oh, this is awesome. And also the guy that just gave it to her, like not just her dad, but like the guy who owned it was right there.
Yeah.
So also like it would have been real awkward. Also, she meets Jacob, who is Billy Black's son, Jacob Black. In the book, they don't meet until they go to La Push. Her and Jacob's chemistry is electric. Oh my God. It's so awkward. It's painful. She hits him with the door. I just cringe.
Because you wrote that, I was thinking, did I miss something?
I was gonna write it in like the SpongeBob meme one where it's like but I just didn't do that.
It's a lot of work, honestly.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. So she's going to Forks High School for the first time. She's the new girl, so this guy Eric flirts with her.
Who I thought the moment he walked on the screen, I was like, oh, Eric's gay in this version.
Yes. No, he,
I forgot this is pre-Glee.
Yes, pre-Glee, gay does not exist. So he kind of like flirts with her. He's like, we're gonna do a feature review on the newspaper, and she's like, please, please don't.
Which, to be fair, that is really awkward.
That would, yeah, I side with her on that for sure.
I got a little thrown because like they're like, oh, like it's like such a small school that like they want to do a feature in the newspaper on this new girl. It looks pretty big. Like it looks like there's like at least a few hundred students,
right?
There.
In the book, they say there's like 300 some students, and I was like, huh, sounds like my school. But there's also multiple buildings, but I get the sense that like they call it a campus, but there's like small buildings. But this literally looks like a big ass school. Like,
yeah, like there'd be new kids.
I guess not. Yeah. So she also meets some other students. So she's in gym playing volleyball, quote unquote, because she's so clumsy. She's almost handicapped. That is a quote from the book. She hits Mike in the head with a volleyball. And that's how she meets Mike and Jessica. Jessica comes over, Anna Kendrick. There's Jessica over there next to Julia. She also meets Angela at the lunch table. This is exactly the scene in which Julia is present. And then this guy, Tyler, comes by and assaults her by kissing her on the cheek without her consent. So that happens.
Very interesting. He's the only black named character other than one we will meet later. Also not great representation. So interesting.
Yeah, it's
Stephanie did not want one of the Cullens to be black.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Jasper's a Confederate soldier, so that would have caused a lot of discord in the household.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a good point.
This is okay.
Crazy detail for her to include.
Yeah.
So yeah, Tyler happens. And then Bella provides Angela a stellar pitch for the paper. Let's sexually harass the swim team and talk about padding in their Speedos.
Yeah, they're talking about so-and-so definitely pads it.
They love that. They loved it. It was such a good pitch.
But to stop here, again, this movie does such a better job introducing all these characters. Like, she hits Mike in the head with the volleyball. Jessica is instantly like, who's moving in on Mike? And so we get that she has a little mean girl in her. Bella says something funny that makes them the sexual harassment, but that makes people be like, oh, okay, in the book, everyone is instantly so nice to her, and she's immediately dismissive. She's immediately like, this dork, this jock, this bitch. And it's like, all these people have done is been nice to you as the new kid, which they did not have to do. They were not like assigned to be your buddy.
She has no self-esteem.
And that's the thing. It's not no self-esteem to me. It's she thinks she's better than everyone else in the book. It's like she's like, these idiots. There's plenty of valid reasons for her to not like Eric or Mike or Tyler because they're idiot teenage boys. But like they don't really get into that. And so the implication that I got from it was that she needs a mature person, a man, someone who's 109 years old, you know. And like it's so easy to come up with a way why you wouldn't want to date a teenage boy. It's like right there.
Yeah.
But it just, and she's not a girl's girl the way she is kind of in the movie.
Yeah, I wrote that because there are a couple moments where she's like, because like in the book, she actually, I think, kind of has some beef with Angela because Angela likes Eric or Angela likes Tyler or something. That guy likes Bella. It's so convoluted. So they're still in the lunchroom and the Cullens walk in and Jessica's explaining who they are. First, we have Rosalie and Emmett. And she also is explaining that like they're together, but they're also adopted siblings. And they're like, oh, that's weird.
But like if I were a kid in that cafeteria and those kids went to my high school, like that would be all I would.
I'd be what the fuck. I would definitely come home first thing and tell my parents there's siblings that are dating at my school.
Yeah, like that would be a story I would tell for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that'd be up with Glee and calling Rachel Crack House Girl. Yeah, those are things that they get over in movies that you don't get over in real life.
No, absolutely not.
There's Alice and Jasper, and then Edward walks in, and Bella's kind of like, "Ooh, who's that?" Just because, like, yeah, he's too good for everyone here. And don't even think about it.
In the book, she says sour grapes, and it's very much like Jessica tried to get with him, I'm sure, and that's why she doesn't like him. She hates Jessica.
But okay, if we're going back to the thought that you guys had that like this is, I mean, it is super weird, and like in her perspective, why would you want to be with a guy who's literally has siblings that are dating? And it's like a weird incest thing. Like you wouldn't want to be a part of that group anyway, I imagine. So here comes the best scene in the movie. They're in biology, and Bella's walking in, and her hair gets blown from the fan, and her scent washes over Edward, and he's like, ooh, like he's going to vomit. This scene is never not funny. Like I cackled when I was watching the scene. It's so funny. And in the book,
but also like she's supposed to smell really good to him, right? So shouldn't he be like,
right?
I don't know what you would do when something
well, like have a boner face. I don't know, like
I just like, yeah. So I'm thinking about, I don't remember really what it was in the book, but I think it was also like he looks so like repulsed by me. And
like she sniffs her hair. So I'm like, she's like, oh, did I forget to wear deodorant today? You know, like
she's been in gym class at that point already.
So that makes sense.
I could see how it would be a worry.
In the book, she has gym class at the end of the day, which I think is how gym class should always be. It should not be first period. Thank you very much. Yes, I had to deal with that.
You get to shower after gym class, though, don't you?
I had like 3 minutes before the bell.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
And also, like, it's not like you're washing your hair as like a girl. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah, they're doing biology stuff. It's deeply uncomfortable because he's like glaring at her. His eyes are black. And then after class, she sees Edward trying to change his science class. But again, this is March. They're probably going to be done in May or June. You can't just change your science class. I digress. She's like upset about that, obviously, because he's clearly trying to get the fuck away from her. So she's at the diner with Charlie. The townspeople are gawking over her, including a dude who, spoilers, will be killed by vampires later.
He used to play Santa.
And she doesn't remember because she was 4.
Yeah, fair.
He is not in the book. In fact, none of these animal killing things that we have throughout the movie are in the book. And I think it is a really, really good insertion by the writer, the screenwriter, because it keeps the plot moving. There's like a sense of imminent danger coming. And I think it's really well done. Back at school, Edward's not there anymore. And that's really weird. Then I have here, maybe there's a scene where someone gets murdered by the animal, the first person, who is like an unnamed character, gets murdered by an animal. Charlie's going over the next county to help him out. So she's talking to her mom on the phone about school. Her mom's like, are there any cute boys? Are people nice to you? And she gets upset because clearly that hit a nerve because Edward was super rude to her and almost threw up on her in biology, but she didn't tell her mom that. Also, let's just quickly track. What's her mom's name? Renee?
Renee.
Renee and Philip. He's clearly doing well. They're going to move to Jacksonville. He's in spring training. You know, he's hitting baseballs in the
We love
baseball
baseball.
place. So,
just like,
you know,
is a minor league baseball career worth moving for? Like, how much money is he making? What does her mom do?
I mean,
They buy a
what
house
does
in
her mom do?
Jacksonville?
Why
I think they're
at
gonna
this
rent
point?
a
Why
house.
not?
In the
We just
movie,
make
they say
him
rent
a
Okay.
major league player.
because then he would be famous.
They're not all
No.
famous.
But to baseball people, they would be famous.
It is just such a
Maybe.
weird job.
Yeah.
You could literally replace it with anything more mundane.
Well, I think it characterizes her mom. Her mom is like trying to be
True.
really youthful. She's also like a big adventurer. So like this guy, like he has to travel around a
Yeah.
lot, you know? So I think it's more so
Yeah.
characterization for Renee than it is for Philip.
Yeah, it's about their broken family.
Yeah, broken families. From someone who
Baseball
comes from a
does break
broken
families.
family. Yeah, baseball does break families.
Yeah.
It's true. So Edward does show back up at school a couple days later, and he introduces himself, quote unquote, properly. That's because he actually like says his name, but it is so fucking weird. He's like, sorry that we didn't get to talk the other day. And she really handles this like a champ, I think. She's like, yeah, okay, you're talking to me. They do biology stuff. They talk about anaphase, metaphase, you know.
Yeah.
And I think they're like supposed to be flirting when they're doing the like looking at the microscope, and then he's like, can I check? And then like she's like, can I check your work? But it just like, comes across so uncomfortable, and it's like supposed to be this like interaction that sets up their chemistry, and I'm like,
yeah.
I was gonna say, did they hate each other? But didn't they date? They dated.
They dated, yes.
Oh, yes. K-Stew and our Pats. It was a big thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a movie that we might cover when we get to Snow White that ended them?
Perhaps. Yes, perhaps.
Yes.
So they're kind of like talking, I guess, after class, and she's telling him why she moved to Forks, and it was because her mom didn't get to spend a lot of time with her husband because she had to stay home with Bella. And so she's like, you know what, I'm gonna move in with my dad and my mom can go be the adventurer that she wants to be. This makes Edward sad.
He's like, oh, that must make you unhappy. And she's like, in the book, he's like, well, that's not fair. And she's like, life isn't fair. And I do not care for Edward in the book, but that was even though Bella's terrible attitude did kind of ruin it for me. I was kind of thinking in the book that like that was the first moment I felt sympathy, empathy for her and her desire to sacrifice to make her mom happy.
Yeah.
And showing that like care that is often expected, especially of young girls and children in difficult situations, is often expected but not rewarded or acknowledged.
Yeah.
So especially, you know, coming with it felt really nice that they acknowledged that.
And he acknowledged it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then now in the context of how they're trying to paint certain family systems and like outside of a certain, now I'm like, it's less charming to me. But that was one of the few times where I was like, you know, a lot of characters are painted as nice, but like it is in literature in general, and like, oh, they're nice, but they actually never do anything nice. And it's like, oh, that is actually a very self-sacrificial thing. That's also very believable that you could see a teenager doing, even if they like being like, oh, you know, and she doesn't paint it as I was just a burden, you know, it's just like, oh, I just wanted, you know. Yeah.
She doesn't overdo it, but she definitely like is like, I know that my mom wants that, like wants to be able to be with him more, and you know, like I can go be with my dad, you know.
Yeah.
But then comes my next favorite part of this movie. She asks if he got contacts. He's like, no, it's the fluorescence, and then he immediately leaves the conversation. I wish I could leave conversations that abruptly. Like, how fantastic. But that was like jarring. He's like, no, it's the fluorescence, and then he's gone.
Shout out to when we did La Belle and La Bête and Katrina trying to physically act out
I
the
wonder.
beast diving into the shrubberies.
I wonder if Catherine Hardwicke was like, I have a movie for you to watch and I want you to act just like this character. And she gave him La Belle and the Bet and was like, here you go. He's like, I understand the assignment. Now she's just like in the parking lot, standing by her truck. But that Tyler kid makes a bad maneuver with his van and he almost hits her.
What was he trying to do? He's coming into the parking lot at like 40 miles an hour.
Right? So in the book, it's really icy. And so like this kid just like he turns too quickly and then he skids. Makes sense. I don't know what he's doing. He's just driving erratically.
He's coming in like full send to this parking lot.
Yeah.
I guess he's leaving the parking lot in theory because it's the end of the day. I don't know.
But still, like, he's booking it.
And when Charlie
and
is like, we're taking away your license at the hospital, I was like
good. Yeah, seriously. But Edward pushes her out of the way. So he's like across the parking lot by his Volvo, and he pushes her out of the way but also catches her so she doesn't hit her head, and he also like blocks the van from smashing them both, and then he just walks away. Then, you know, we're at the hospital. Charlie's like kind of like freaking out a little bit. He comes up and he's, you know, getting Tyler to shut the fuck up, because which is good, because in the book he was absolutely so annoying. Then we meet the young doctor in town.
I jump scared. Literally, it was a jump scare to me. I was like, oh, when he walked in.
Oh,
Carlisle. Because
he is really pale.
I think the makeup's bad. I think on all the vampire, because it's so obviously not on their neck. At least for Carlisle, it's like that neck is a different tone.
Oh, interesting. I didn't look at his.
And it's also just like they put so much powder on them to make them pale that they all look like dry and crusty.
Yes.
Like it's not good. Like they're not like glow from within, like look good. They look like Halloween makeup vampires.
And that's the thing with racism and idealizing whiteness. I say this as an incredibly white person. Both appearance-wise and genetically and culturally. But like, people aren't supposed to be that pale. People are not supposed to be that pale, and it's not hot.
No.
Kristen Stewart's kind of paler than all of them, just like
naturally.
Yeah. And so,
maybe that's why they had to do it. They're like, oh, this bitch so pale.
But because it's her natural look, but it's like trying to appeal the super like pale. It's like gross. Like, I'm sorry.
They made a lot of weird choices with the looks of the Cullens too. Like Nikki Reed's hair.
Anytime Rosalie shows
like
up,
bad highlights. Like they didn't even just like go blonde with her.
They didn't touch up her roots.
No.
And her hair looks like it was just bleached and it's so dry. Like she has not done an oil treatment.
Yes. Yeah.
They're not
a weird looking family.
They don't read as glamorous to me.
No.
They read as like upsetting. Like they're probably gonna say something racist later. Like they're gonna invite you to church.
If I saw these people,
I just want to say that this is in my house, but it is being invited by a non-denominational Christian to church was always horrifying to me as a kid.
Yes.
Yeah, a golden crucifix. Yeah, whenever they're like, come to church, it's always like, I don't want to go to your church. I have my own church.
Carlisle, I kind of almost like that was almost matched like what I thought from the book.
Okay,
fair.
Interesting.
Like, I don't know. He's just like a pretty fine looking older gentleman, unassuming, you know?
Yeah. Carlisle is donating to some shady politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I believe
he's the reason there's no
like
public transit in your town
and forcing them to live in his home.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
No, where's everyone wants to call everything grooming, but I'm like, where is the group? Because the grooming is so obvious to me with this. Okay, we'll get there, but I just want to say a lot of people died in the Spanish flu.
Yes, the flu
and
of
he picked the hot
19,
one.
whatever.
Yeah, the hot teenager.
And like, also, was he matchmaking his kids when he changed the other ones, or that wasn't intentional?
But not Edward, because that's his special boy. Because Edward was his first. He did.
Okay, here's what happened. Here's what happened in the book, as the person who read it the most recently and read it in full. Carlisle chose Edward because his parents had already died in the flu, and he was like, I have nothing left to live for. He was like, I'm gonna die. And Carlisle felt bad and was like, I can give you another chance. And he changed him. And so he had a companion, not necessarily
There's only one
companion.
orphan
But well, here's the thing. Then he made Esme, who became his wife, and then he made Rosalie, and Rosalie was supposed to be for Edward. And Edward and Rosalie did not get along. He didn't like how ostentatious she was and stuff like that.
Fair.
So that's sort of what the vibe was. And it's not matchmaking in the sense that like, oh, I'm just like hooking these teenagers up so they can fuck. It's because in this vampire lore, they have very loyal companions, and that's sort of part of their being.
Oh, I do want to point out the Burke Museum mentioned that there's nothing about imprinting in Quileute culture.
Love that. Oh, yikes.
They get married as adults.
Not even in this book, but we do need to point that out at the top.
I also like that. To me, the imprinting thing, I'm like, you came up with that in the last book to give Jacob a thing.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there, but as Titus Burgess said, I didn't feel right then. Still doesn't feel right now.
So we meet Dr. Carlisle Cullen. In the book, though, Bella's actually she's pretty badly bruised, and she has a concussion and stuff, but she's like totally fine. Then Bella overhears Carlisle, Rosalie, and Edward talking, and we get the vibe that like Rosalie's like pissed off, and she's like, Edward, you've fucked us all. But then Bella confronts Edward about the accident, and he proceeds to gaslight her. It's like, no, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. I was right next to you.
The book lays on the gaslighting so thick. Of like, you hit your head, Bella. Maybe it was the voice that they were using, but I was like, oh, fuck this guy.
Yeah, it was.
What's he supposed to say?
Yeah, like,
so, like, I don't know. It was so crazy. I just like wanted to help you.
Yeah, there you go. That's actually way better. Well, I was gonna say, like, I understand the gaslighting in the situation because it's the self-preservation of, keeping his secret and his family's secret, and I understand that. But yeah, no, I do like your version way better. So, just a little edit note for Stephanie Meyer.
For Stephanie, I would be vampires are actually one of my biggest fears. So I would not want to be a vampire, but I know how to be. I would be. I know how to do it, I guess. I know how to be a hidden mythical creature. I could be a fairy. I could be in one of those mermaid shows.
Well, here's the thing about Bella, okay? She is like, I'm not going to tell anyone. Like, just tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to blab. And then there's a field trip to the compost place, which does not happen in the book.
They needed something to do, though, because they don't do anything.
They don't do anything. They just go to class. She drives. I'm so sick of hearing about her truck being loud. But anyway, so Bella and Edward are literally like duking it out about the accident. There's like students right in front of them and right behind them.
Yeah.
In the middle of this field trip.
People can overhear. Yeah.
And he gets like really angry at her for not letting it go. And so I'm like, ooh, this isn't red flag number 1, but this is probably one of the most obvious ones.
Mm-hmm.
He gets mad. They're walking out back to the bus. Alice tries to be nice to Bella, and it was like, shut the fuck up, basically. And tells her to go sit in a different bus.
And
he closes the door of the
bus. Yeah. And then I think this is right around the time when she like wakes up from a dream and sees him in her room. And then turns on the light,
red flag,
and he's not there. And I'm like, but we know later in the movie and in the book that he does actually watch her sleep. So that means he was actually there.
And he admits that to her later, and she's kind of just like, okay.
Yeah, again, that's
speaking of abstinence culture, predatory behavior, not
good. Don't like it.
He's basically edging.
And also, they've had one conversation, really.
Right, like one pleasant conversation.
Yeah, like the conversation in biology into the hallway.
Yes.
And then him
all
being
hell breaks loose.
Yeah. So he has no reason to like her.
They have no reason.
She has no reason to
like him.
But
I guess it's because she has no reason to like him. He has no reason to like her. But I guess for him, it's because he's like, I can't hear her thoughts.
He's more so intrigued by her as a thing because he can't hear her thoughts, not necessarily of who she is as a person, I don't think, because we don't really learn a lot about her because he's not actually, at least in the book, he is asking questions, but he's very like demanding about it, which I don't care for. In the book, he's at least getting to know her. In this movie, it's like Bella's completely just a blank canvas.
I just want to say, as we go through this franchise, I'm sure we're going to revisit it at some point. That this whole story has potential to have something interesting to say about what it means to be human, but instead it goes for a very lazy transitional fantasy, and that can work. Ariel wants to be a human and leaves mermaidhood behind. I think the Anderson story has a lot of interesting things to say about humanity, like the last unicorn. Like, there's so many interesting stories of mythical creature ex-human, and like the choosing to be what you are. And I think that it's interesting. I like the Little Mermaid as a trans allegory, so it's like it's not like I'm against that, but this is definitely not a trans allegory story. So
it doesn't have any depth to it.
Yeah, it's just a fantasy of like, what could you could be immortal and not have to deal with like the things that make us human, and that's good. I'm like, no, like,
I think
be human, go to prom with these dumbass kids.
It tries to do that in, like, I guess it would be Breaking Dawn Part 1 and maybe the movie before that, because he kind of explains why he doesn't want to change her.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about that later.
Yeah. So they're back at school and they're talking about going to La Push, baby, the beach at the res. And Bella like invites Edward after he does that apple trick with his foot that creates the book's cover art. But he politely declines because it's too busy of a beach.
It's really because their colonial asses aren't allowed there.
Well, we'll find that out. La Push, baby, Bella's friends are going to surf.
I do like the cut that they do there where he's like, oh, it's too busy, and then they cut to the beach.
And there's literally nothing there.
Yeah.
So they're going to surf in what I imagine is like the coldest water ever. I think
Anna Kendrick was really into Mike if she's willing to do this.
Yeah.
No, Anna Kendrick was like the surfer. She was like, y'all are wimps. She was like ready for it. She had a wetsuit.
So my memory is hazy. At some point before or after this, I can't remember which, both Mike and Eric ask Bella to prom, but she says no.
Is it before the field trip?
I think so.
Yes, because she tells Mike, you should ask Jessica.
In the book, Tyler also asks her because he feels so bad about almost killing her, and it's super annoying. But she says no, and then he's like, "Oh, well, he's not asking her to prom.
It's a lady's choice.
It's like a Sadie Hawkins. And then
Eric
Tyler promises to take Bella to prom later in the year, so that becomes important in the book, but not in this movie at all. But yeah, so in addition, Bella also convinces Angela to ask Eric because she's a strong, independent woman, and I was like, wow, Bella is a girl's girl in this movie.
Because in the book, Jessica calls her and is like, is it okay if I ask Mike to the dance?
Yes.
And she's very much like, she's just doing this out of obligation, and she's glad that I don't want to go because she's like, I can't dance, I'll injure someone, I'm going to Seattle. And she's like, Jessica is only half-heartedly trying to convince me to go. And you're like, she still is calling you a girl she barely knows to be like,
she's
is it
being
okay?
A girl's girl.
Yeah, like
it is pretty wild.
This movie I think does a lot more to actually make Jessica a little more unlikable. Like, not like crazy unlikable, but if Bella doesn't like this version of Jessica, you get it a little more because she is much more like, that's my Mike, you know. Whereas in the book, it's like this girl's like perfectly nice and you just hate her.
But she does like Jessica in this. They're buds.
Yeah. It's
very much like these are high school friends that they're not going to be besties forever, but they can hang out. Yeah,
exactly. But so they're still at La Push, and Jacob Black and his friends come over, and Jessica makes fun of Bella basically for Edward denying her. And one of Jacob's friends is like, yeah, good, like, they're freaks. The Cullens don't come here. And he says it very ominously. So Jacob and Bella go for a walk, and that ominous tone like really made her want to know about why don't the Cullens come here.
She's like, oh yeah, you picked up on that. Like, well, he said,
what do you
so
mean
ominous.
You picked up on that? It was so obvious. So he tells her the legend of the Cold Ones, which according to Cullen's research is fake. And then after this, it's a Bella Google sesh part 1, and she finds a book of the, how do you say it, Quileute legend of the Cold Ones.
I'm pretty sure I googled and listened to the video multiple times because you know how I always forget to look up pronunciation.
Yes, so thank you for that. And so she finds this book, and they're back at school. It's a really nice day out, super sunny. And Jessica's like, oh yeah, the Cullens get pulled out of school on sunny days because they go camping and stuff. And they're like, we need to go dress shopping in Port Angeles before all the good dresses are gone. And Bella's like, can I come? I just want to go, I want to go to this bookstore. And they're like, yeah, definitely. You need to help us pick out dresses. So she gives them really lackluster feedback during their dress shopping.
Not a helpful shopping partner.
No,
No.
if I wasn't going to prom and I would go shopping with my friends, I would put in the effort to give them feedback on the dresses because I care about my friends, even if I don't care about going to the prom.
Yeah.
Come on.
And also, those dresses were bad.
Yeah.
I think it's also probably the time period because I'm sure in high school I thought those were cute, but
I
and she should have steered them in a different direction.
So she ditches her friends to go to the bookstore. Now, in the book, she doesn't go into the only bookstore in Port Angeles because it's like a supernatural, like a spiritual, like tarot type bookstore, and she's super judgmental about it. And also she's only going to the bookstore to find new books. She's not looking for a specific book on these legend. This book was invented for this movie. That was not the plot.
They are giving a character motivation to do actions, and I love that for them.
I know, right?
Even though I don't think she ever really uses the book.
No, listen, there's a Google search part 2 that we will get to. But Bella gets lost going to the Italian restaurant that they're all supposed to meet up at, and she starts getting harassed and threatened by a group of scoundrels. And then a wild Volvo appears from the darkness, and Edward is driving it, and he scares the scoundrels away. And so she gets in the car and they're driving away, and he's like, you have to distract me or I'm going to go back there and rip off their heads. And she's like, you should put on a seatbelt. And then he laughs at her dismissively.
Rude.
I don't know how she is not terrified in that scene.
Right?
The way that he is acting there is horrifying. I would roll out of the car.
You're literally trading one possible attack situation for another.
Yeah.
It's scary. In the book, they talk about how oh wow, you weren't scared at all. And I was like, yeah, why wasn't she scared? And she was like, oh, whatever. It was really weird. But at least in this, she does look freaked out. And
I mean, those guys in the darkness, that was scary. I was like, this is upsetting.
And I thought this happened in a different movie. And I think I'm just combining it with the one from New Moon, where she also goes to Port Angeles and gets into a dangerous situation. But she chooses that situation and she's not in imminent danger.
Yeah.
But so they go to the restaurant and they see Jessica and Angela have already eaten and they're leaving.
Now, here's a thought.
Here's about the timeline on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
because I couldn't
pitch black when she's walking around and gets found, but
so
she left.
It doesn't look that big.
Yeah, and she knew what book she was looking for, so she would have been like, I need this book, and the guy would have been like, it's over there. She grabs the book, checks out. Okay, it should still be daylight.
Yeah, and it's a sit-down restaurant, so it's not like it was they got their food quickly. They were there for at least an hour.
But they were leaving messages. And I was like, you're bad friends if you're not okay, we need to go look for her. She went to the bookstore. Let's go find whatever bookstores there are here.
Yeah, this is where I was like, do I get it? In that it's okay, you're hanging out with your friend and you keep texting and they're not responding. And you're like, oh, you're ignoring us? But I was like, my instinct was, why didn't they look for her? Why weren't they more worried? They're just oh, we messaged and then we ate. And it's
even if they were like, oh, she's probably ignoring us, it's well, we should probably go find her just in case she's not.
Yeah. It's especially when you're teenage girls.
Yeah.
That's I feel that's the top kind of person where if they're not texting you back, you should be a little worried. It's not you're 30-year-old adults with jobs where it's oh, they're probably, it's yeah.
Right. Also, if you're actively hanging out with someone and they're like, hey, I'm gonna go do this thing, I'll be back, and then they don't show up, it's I feel as a friend, you have an obligation to make sure that person is okay, because you're
there's been a solar eclipse and it's gotten pitch black outside all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is
weird is that?
This is also where I was oh, I don't think we're supposed to like Jessica. Or this is where I was yeah.
Yeah.
To me, I was just that's just movie friends.
Also, in the book, he's victim blames her. He's why do you constantly get into so much trouble? You're a magnet for trouble and danger. And that is like a constant in the book. But he's not like that in this, which is good. So he was more
Again,
still horrifying.
Miss
Yeah.
Rosenberg had enough sense to be like,
We're not keeping that.
yeah.
Yeah, so Edward takes her on a date to the Italian restaurant. He doesn't order anything, and Bella orders mushroom ravioli. And the
I'd love if Bella was vegetarian. She has a garden burger later. Is she vegetarian?
She has
I
a
thought the
the
garden burger
first
was
time
probably like a veggie burger
at the
Yeah.
diner.
or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
So
I
I'm
think
like-
she maybe is vegetarian, but
would
how
love
funny
that.
would it be if he was like, "Yeah, we consider ourselves vegetarians." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm a vegetarian too." You know?
I don't think animals deserve to die.
And then she's like, "Yeah, I'm morally against you."
I
Like,
would love.
Because
anyway,
the Cullens could use blood bags.
Oh,
They
like
don't
is
have to kill
that
animals.
is
donated
that
blood, but
true
then
blood that they do that?
Well, true blood vampires
They
have
have
like become
fake
public
blood.
knowledge. So there's like
yeah.
bottled blood, but
becoming human, being human. It was on Sci-Fi a long time ago. One of the
an
vampire,
angel.
yeah, the vampire was, oh yeah, an angel. The vampire was a nurse, and so he would steal blood from the hospital.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
how he got
definitely
blood
and yeah, so Carlisle could get them.
very easily. But
Oh,
then
yeah.
again, you're taking blood from other people who need it, so that is also an argument. It's like
Mhm.
animals, but they say, I think in the book, or maybe it is also in the movie, that they only hunt in areas where like there's like too high of a population of like whatever animals. So like they're environmentalists.
Mm.
So you know, but so at the restaurant, she's grilling him about this accident and then the also horrible thing that I don't want to name that almost happened to her. In this conversation though, he kind of admits that he can read minds because he also kind of says it in the car.
Yeah, well, he says sex, money, cat. And I was like, wow, tag yourself on cat. Being in public, oh, I can't wait to be home with my cat.
I did like that.
And then he also kind of gives her more hints as to like what he is. And so I don't really know what else happened in that conversation except that. So they're driving home and they're going past the police station and Carlisle's car is there. And then Bella sees that her dad is also still there. And so if they find out that the guy that she met in the diner who played Santa one year when she was 4 was mauled by an animal. But we already saw the scene where he was murdered by human-looking people things. Turns
Yeah.
out they're vampires. In the book, this does not happen.
And this scene was like, wow, this could have been Teen Wolf, and I would have loved it so much more because in Teen Wolf, right, like Sile's dad is the sheriff, and his mom works at the hospital, so they have a natural reason to be connected to like where all that information comes in, and like Twilight has that set up, but refuses.
Refuses to be like, let's solve a murder mystery.
Yeah,
kind of
and they put,
thing.
I'm like, because this, I think that's. If you ignore like, it'd be easier to ignore the gross aspects of vampiredom if they were actively doing this thing to like help their community. Like, there's ways to make it more where they're
very self-serving.
Yes, and so that doesn't. I remember that's what I thought when I saw Bring Down Part 2. I was like, wow, these are all really like vindictive, selfish people about all the characters.
Yeah.
I also just like, and I think that this is probably just like something for a different, like more mature book, but it's like, I want there to be the distrust between Bella and like this guy who's has no anger issues. And I guess she doesn't fully know he's a vampire yet, but it's like, I want there to be a moment where she's like, did he do this? And that's obviously not going to come in.
Well, the fact that the vampires are basically also good and safe, to me, if like the fantasy, if I'm thinking of Jonathan Harker getting stripped by Dracula as he's taken up, like the fantasy of it is that there's danger. And there is that here, but it's so diluted that there's
the danger is he just keeps reminding her, like, I could snap your neck. I could fucking eat you if I wanted to. You smell so delicious. And that's constant in this book. And it is disgusting.
It's just like, but it doesn't feel sexy. It feels like the vampires are so boring. It feels
R-wordy.
Yeah, it's like they're boring. It's like it doesn't feel like a sexy fantasy. It feels like a boring R-word fantasy. It's just like, it's not. Like, I think of the vampires, like, oh, and they also kill people. Like, I feel like the show Vampire Diaries leaned into the sexiness of the bad vampire more, which again, personally afraid of vampires. I don't like love. That's not like my fantasy, but
spoiler for the episode.
But like I can see the appeal of that fantasy.
Right.
But this is like
same thing with like True Blood.
yeah,
like,
this is like so sanitized that it's like, well, it's only the shitty parts left.
And it's also because it's so sanitized, like there's never an actual sense of danger. Like
Yeah.
even like later when like Alice gets like a scent of her blood or like Jasper gets a scent of her blood, like I'm never worried about her.
right.
And I'm not
Yeah.
worried about her with Edward at all.
Right. Yeah.
And
it's
you know, I think
really
that's just product of it being like YA and it needing to be a little bit more simplistic, but it is like it feels like there's so much fun opportunity in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't even
Yeah.
go again like the Teen Wolf fun YA, let's solve a murder mystery. And so we're just
Yeah.
kind of left with bleh.
Which kind of
This.
I have a lot of thoughts about the overall plot of this first movie, especially, or the lack thereof.
I was like, what
Yeah,
plot? Yeah.
really.
Yeah. That are related to that.
So the one thing I want to pick on in this scene is, okay, so Bella shows up at the station and Charlie's just like, hey, not like, what the fuck are you doing here? You're supposed to be with your
Yeah.
friends. You should be home by now. He is just like not phased at all that she's there. And I'm like, you should be totally weirded out that she's here.
Because in every other scene, he has pretty normal dad reactions.
Yeah.
Like when she gets injured, she's like, you call mom? He's like, yeah.
Yeah, of course I called your mother. Yeah. All right. So she goes home and it's Bella's Google Sesh part 2. She is kind of flipping through this book that she bought that she'll never read again about the Quileute legends. And in the book of Twilight, she just Googles vampire, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think that's what happens. But in the movie, she's like Googling, cold ones and looking at all these different articles, and she's seeing words like strong, blood, immortal. And she's also Googling the other legends from around the world, including Egypt and Peru, which are 2 places I believe that they go in like the later movies to find people to help them with their tasks.
Yeah.
So this is basically how she like basically decides like, okay, he's a vampire. So next day at school, she basically like shoulder checks him, and he knows that she knows, and she knows that he knows that she knows. And they go out into the woods. How did they get there? Can't remember.
They just walk.
Right? They don't go into school. They just
like
walk into the
and
woods.
no one. This is again why they're bad, because no one's like,
where is the kid who's like super observant and just like
Yeah.
looking around? It's like, oh look, there's like there's like
Edward
Cullen.
and Bella are fucking in the woods. That's
Yeah.
the rumor around
Or they're just
school.
like, huh, that's weird. They're just walking in the woods.
Or they're
you know?
smoking, or they're just making out. Like
Something.
Do
Yeah.
you think Charlie
I
got a
want that
call
kid.
being like Bella's not in school?
Right? Like, why wouldn't that happen?
no one cares
Yeah.
about anyone's safety.
Carlisle doesn't care because Edward's been to high school like 50 times, but
Right.
We will get
Charlie will.
there.
Also at some point around this area, this is when Charlie and the other police officers are tracking in the woods, and Victoria is the one who's running and creating the tracks, leading them a different way. So that also happens, but they're in the woods and he creepily gets her to say what he is.
This is an
Vampire.
iconic scene. Say it out loud.
Vampire.
And I will. Do you remember when
camera work in this scene? What was
Dizzying.
that? What was the point? I loved it, but it's just like, woo.
it adds to
I
the
did not like it.
iconicness. It is an iconic, like when you think of this movie, I do think of this scene. I think of the Taylor Swift on SNL sketch where they were Frankensteins. And he's like, say it out loud, just like, you're green, you have big bolts in your neck, you freak out or on fire.
Yeah, so she says vampire, and then he immediately grabs her, throws her on his back, sprints through the woods like, I have to show you what I look like in the sun. And so like they run to this like
You forgot the
sleep
best
ring.
line also though.
What?
Hang on tight, spider monkey.
That is later.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
So I literally thought it was this scene, and I was like, why isn't it happening? And then I was like, did I imagine it? So I went a little crazy during this
thing
movie.
to imagine.
I know. I was like, because it didn't happen in the book, and I was like, I know it fucking happened. Like, I am not imagining this. So yeah, that happens in the second time that he does that to her, which again, another set of red flags, but I'm not Bella. Um, so he takes her to a sunny clearing and he sparkles and shine bright like a diamond. And she's like, wow, you're so
It's beautiful.
beautiful.
Okay, what got me is
He's like, this is the skin of a killer.
I did not see him unbutton his shirt.
He turned around like this.
He was like this. I was like, oh, it just popped open. I do remember the chiseled abs being a selling feature. I do remember my friend, I'm telling a friend in high school it was bad, and they were like, but he has chiseled abs. And I remember thinking, okay. Also, though,
didn't care.
Wouldn't it have been so cool if in the sun they looked like the corpses that they are? Isn't that such a great little metaphor? Isn't that such a great storytelling? And as to the like danger or the how it's like they're undead. It's like they're immortal, but they don't get to experience like the beauty of human life. They're isolated.
Well, that would be for a better story.
I know, but
I'm also like, what does it mean? Like, is that him starting to burn and that's why he sparkles? Like, is his skin dying? It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. I don't like it.
Again, we're a lore podcast, so we talk a lot about lore, and it's not that I'm one of those people who's like, things need to be faithful to whatever, because again, there's no canon, right? But it's like a lot of this lore like captures human anxieties, fears, like thoughts, and there's so many interesting things that you can do, and people come back to vampires and unicorns and all this stuff because there's interesting stuff. And this has become the vampire movie in a way, but it's like has so little interest in what vampires are.
Also, what I'll say, even on a cloudy day, you have to wear sunscreen because the UV rays are still coming through the clouds. So it doesn't make any sense because this is like one of the only things where vampires can be like out during the day. Like, in the Vampire Diaries, they could be out during the day because they had the rings. And then like in Buffy, he can only be out at night. Why can't they be out on a cloudy day? There's still sun.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, okay, maybe he wouldn't shine as brightly, but he'd still be glistening a little bit.
And he can burn. So they burn.
I don't know.
Lightly, I guess. They'd char.
But then they'd be tan, and we cannot have that whiteness.
So this is also when he's like running around spastically like a lunatic and threatening her and explaining like, I'm a predator. And she's like, you won't hurt me. And he like grabs her arm and drags her. That's when like then he takes her. And
I do want to say that this reminds me of Sound of Music. Because the scene where Liesel is in the gazebo dancing around with that Nazi.
Yeah.
And she's like,
Nazi.
She's like, you're always gonna love me. Like you're looking out for me. You wouldn't hurt me. And I'm like, he's a Nazi, and he will turn you into the Nazis at the end of this movie. Yeah. And that's how I feel about Edward. It's like he lives with a Confederate. He probably is. Like, it's just like he's this, and he's like, I'm a predator. And when people say I'm not nice, I'm a predator, I'm gonna hurt you, believe them.
And also, you just had to distract him, not but days ago, so that he didn't go do murder. He told you about it. You were in the car. He was like, just get me so I don't go do murder.
Yeah.
Do you not think that would eventually turn on you?
And they do that whole we're vegetarian joke. And I just want to say, you could just say you're not cannibals, because those animals are getting their asses eaten and not in a hot way. That deer is dead, and that deer did nothing wrong. I'm just snoring from my semi-glass house because I do eat fish. But it's just like, because later Carlisle says, it pains me to hurt another creature, even like a murderer. And you're like, you live off of the blood, the raw blood of other creatures. Animals are also creatures. I can understand not wanting to kill a person, and that killing a person and killing a deer are two very different things. Yeah. Even if one is a murderer, but you use the word creature. You use the word creature.
He did.
You're not you're not a Buddha. You're not St. Francis. You're not like, I don't harm any living thing. You eat blood.
You should write him a letter.
I should. I'm just saying. The last
Dear
unicorn,
Dr. Carlisle Cullen.
The last unicorn would not fuck with you. Those wood nymphs in Narnia would not fuck with you. And I'm just saying that. I'm saying that now.
You're so brave.
Yeah. I'm a hero.
So in the book, this whole scene where like the whole like I know what you are type thing happens, and the excessive threatening and reminding that he is a monster, this happens because in the book, as they were originally going to go to Seattle together, but then they didn't go for some reason. And instead, they go to his favorite part of the dense Washington woods. And they hike for like ever. And of course, like she's so clumsy, she's almost handicapped. Again, a quote from the book. And they finally get to this clearing where he does the whole threatening spiel and talking romantically about his bloodlust for her. And they kiss, and she's like aggressive about it. So that's how that scene goes in the book. And then basically this whole sequence just ends with them laying in the meadow. He sparkles, and that's it, right? I don't think anything else happens.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then is this when he comes over to her house and sleeps over, and then they make out a little bit?
I think so. And also
Yeah, and
when he tells her that he watches her sleep.
Yes. And she's like, cool.
And he's
Yeah.
really aggressive. He's really, it's very aggressive and violent, which, you know, if you're into that, you're into that. But then he throws her on the bed. He's like, you need to stop. And I'm like, stop reciprocating the kissing that you initiated. That it's her fault that she's too smelly, seductive, whatever. And she's in like either her underwear or very short shorts. And he's like standing there in jeans.
If we're going to take it back to conservative views and potentially the conservative views of Mormons, it is pretty much the onus of women to not tempt men. And that's how it is in the book, that like she literally is like, oh, what can I do to like not tempt you? Like, should I wear my hair a certain way? Should I do this? And I'm like, don't like that. Okay, so next day at school, they go to school a lot. They arrive at school together, and the whole school is just in awe of this, except the adopted siblings who scowl at him from Rosalie's red convertible, which in the book seemed way cooler. In the movie, it's so ugly. I'm so sorry, but it is. It's ugly.
It would be talk of the town if they're like, wow, a Cullen is dating someone they're not related to. Wow.
And especially since Edward, you know, doesn't date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they snuck off in the woods together, and the next day,
all of a sudden,
like there's pregnancy rumors. It's a small town.
Yeah. So Edward wants to take Bella to meet his family. And I think this is right around when like Billy Black comes with Jacob and like the fish fry, and they're like, we're here to watch the game. And Billy like looks really shady at her. In the book, he's a lot more aggressive with his anti-Cullens thing, because they don't have like a direct conversation about it, but there's like a hint where he's like, you need to be careful. And like her dad's not around, it's just her and Billy. And it's like, it's kind of strange.
Because the dad's very pro Cullens in the book, because they stick together the way a family should.
And he's fine. Yes, that's exactly what he says. Yes. And he's fine with Edward. Like his relationship with Edward throughout the book seems totally fine. Yeah. Like he doesn't get like weirdly tense like he does toward the end of the movie. And the part where he actually meets Charlie is a little bit like, it's still, you know, nice. So yeah, they go to meet the Cullens, and they're making Italiano for her.
This is cinema.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was cute they were making dinner for her, but it was also like,
that's cute, yeah.
so many things happening that okay, let's go through it. Rosalie's like, is she even Italian? As if that's a requirement to eat Italian food. Like she's been alive long enough to know that all kinds of people enjoy Italian food. I don't understand that.
And we don't get an answer, and I don't think she is.
I mean, so.
Swan?
Not Italian.
Renee.
Yeah. I mean, her name is Isabella. There's a lot of non-Italian people named Isabella. Also, Isabella could also be Spanish, you know.
Yeah.
It could be German, you know, Swiss.
Just be American. I think it's like one of the most popular baby names.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yes. I love Rosalie smashing the bowl in her.
Oh my god.
Oh, when she's like,
I didn't eat because, you know, I know you guys don't eat. And she's like,
all right, I already ate.
So good.
And she's just like, no, this was a waste. And it's like, and then the mom Esme is at least like, oh, well, that's very considerate.
Yeah. It's so good. Like this is a masterpiece of a scene.
Just
I also always notice how short Esme is compared to everyone else.
Right?
Like, she's like noticeably smaller than the rest of the family, which I guess there's not a thing about vampires being tall, but it's like the way that this scene is framed, it just looks weird.
In the book, they don't cook for her. She shows up and Esme makes Edward play piano for her Bella, and it's really weird. And he plays her a song that he wrote for her, which is like a weird lullaby. But yeah, Rosalie shatters the dish and it's
It's
hilarious.
just so good. That they don't even say Italian food. We're making Italiano.
Yeah, and like she says something in Italian, and then Esme replies with molto bene, which is like very good. Like, and so it's perfect.
But then the ending with the shattering.
And then Carlisle is like, I think it went well. Like, it's perfect. You're right. It is truly cinema.
Yeah.
Capital C.
Cinema.
So Edward takes Bella upstairs to his room, and it's just
They
full of books.
do meet Alice and Jasper.
Oh yeah,
Alice is like, I think Bella and I will be great friends. So
She
we've
says,
set
I
up.
know that we're going to be great friends.
Because the future. Yeah.
We did the same thing.
Yeah, the same little point.
That's the symbol for she sees the future.
She sees the future. That's
Well, they
hashtag
also-
Adine. But
In
like
this one, don't they walk past all the graduation caps too and have that talk?
briefly.
this is where where they say, oh, we can stay in a longer place the younger we start out. And I'm like, you cannot pass for a high school freshman.
No, there's no way.
Cannot. And this is dumb.
They're barely passing as what, sophomores or juniors?
Or it's juniors, yeah. This is
Well, but also they could pass as like 22.
They could go to college. Just go to college forever. There's so many more interesting things to learn in college.
Because I'm like, if I was immortal, yeah, go to college, get a bunch of different degrees, learn languages, like learn music. Like you could do it like high school in the middle of nowhere.
It's so limiting.
Yeah, it's like also then you could get college, like have a career, and people are less skeptical about the aging of adults than they are of children.
It's also like I still look pretty much the same as I did at 22. Like I could, I could be a vampire. Who knows? I'm not.
That's what
I'm very pale.
Cullen.
But it's like you could live like at least like 20 years.
And that's
in the same
where
place.
a flaw with the casting of this movie is like, obviously in every teen thing we're casting adults, but like in this one specifically, it's like if part of the plot is that they have to be in high school to live,
they should have got the person
clearly 30.
And it's
casted Mean Girls. Like those people look like they could pass for high schoolers.
But honestly, even because even like a Riverdale kind of look, like a KJ Appa or a Cole Sprouse, like definitely are closer to passing for a high schooler in that when that show came out than Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole Cullen family, like those all look like full ass adults.
Oh yeah. Like
Alice looks like she's a designer on Trading Spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emmett is like a monster.
He's huge, and like that's the thing. Some teen boys are big and like beef, and like, but he doesn't look like a 17-year-old big boy.
No, that is not a 17-year-old boy.
And Nikki Reed, what they did with her hair just makes her look older, and what they did with her makeup makes her look older. Like that's like a full adult woman.
Yeah. Jasper is the only one who does give corpse as a vampire. He is giving like Timothy Chalamet, just like woke
distinctly
up.
Not Southern corpse though.
Yeah.
So yeah, they go up to his room, and I would like to make a note about their house. Okay. In the book, it's described as like a renovated older house where like you can see the charm of the old house, but they did renovate some modern things. That is a fully modern house. It is straight up.
And it's also so much glass, which I'm like, on sunny days, can you be in there? Like,
and then you don't reflect, so it's obvious.
Yeah. They like sunlight. Like, I think they like that feeling, but if what you're saying is like they can also actually burn eventually, like you would want to close the shade.
And also like you have a glass house, someone drives by to deliver your mail on a sunny day, and they're like, what the fuck is going on in there?
That's a good point.
Am I high?
Yeah.
Also, I think I forgot to mention this, that I do think Taylor Lautner is so much hotter even in this movie, even with his long ass hair, than Robert or really any of the vampires.
Nasty wig that he's wearing.
He also looks
he looks like a teenager. Yeah. But like even like looking at Taylor Lautner now as an adult, like he's a very attractive man, and it's like these vampires do not give like sexy glamour to me. They give, and
the thing I don't understand is the cold skin. She's obsessed with his cold skin in the book. Oh, I would never be obsessed with cold skin.
Because then like they touch you and you're like, ooh.
Cold.
Yeah.
But I do want to say
Lyle touches me with his cold hands, and I'm like, oh, don't touch me. It's cold.
Say when Lyle touches me with his cold hands. But like when I think
you say,
of,
oh, it's cold, not
yeah.
stop touching me. I gotta have a talk with you guys.
But like, okay, the thing is, I would be Team Jacob, except I know he grows up to imprint on that baby. And that is a hard no for me. That is I do not,
Well, it's also hard to be Team Jacob because she just doesn't like him.
Yeah.
She doesn't like him like that. She's like, he's a friend.
Yeah. So then it's like, I can't really be Team you because you're not going to win.
You're not going to win.
I like to win.
But for me, it's just, I'm very anti-dating babies. And
it's a strong stance to take, but thank you for putting that out there. Yeah, you're really
I'm a hero. And I'm going to say it is one of the top 5 worst writing choices of the 21st century, because we talk a lot about adapting old stories on this podcast and weird elements in like these fairy tales and myths. But this was not there. There's no reason for her to add this. She chose it. And it's like, and
do you combine that decision also with the baby's name? Because I feel like those two kind of have to go together.
Oh yeah. The fact that
crazy writing choices of the 21st century.
The baby's name.
Two unforgivable writing choices.
How the baby was depicted on screen.
Yes.
That's a filmmaking choice.
Yeah. But again, like crimes
against humanity.
Yeah.
And vampiredom.
Yeah.
So in Edward's room, they dance to no music at all. It's weird.
And because she says she can't dance. But it's like you're not doing like an interpretive, you're just swaying.
You're moving your feet, shuffling your feet, moving, spinning. It's easy.
There's the meme where she's like, what are you listening to? Because that became a meme later and people would just play random things.
Yeah. So this is where he flings her on his back and sprints into the woods again and says, you better hold on, spider monkey. So I did not imagine it. Yeah. And so in the book, this never happens. This line never comes up. And like I said, I can't really forgive the screenwriter now.
But like she wrote a classic quotable line.
True.
She did.
But it is appalling.
But we all think about it.
That's true. It does live rent free in my head.
Yeah.
And then they do something in the woods. I don't remember what happens.
They don't kiss, I think. They just like look from the tree.
I think this is where he tells her about how Carlisle made him and Esme and how they're vegetarians, that Alice can see the future, though it's subjective. I think that's where all this comes out.
Yeah, this is where I'm like, groomer, you're picking up like a dying 17-year-old to like make them it's many 17-year-old orphans would be dying in the Spanish flu. If the whole point is it's a fate worse than death, just let them
die. Yeah,
especially if he's a doctor, because doctors see people die a lot.
I think maybe no, he didn't get picked. He didn't pick him because he had a special power.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if he was some nobleman and Edward was like an orphan servant boy that got hit by a carriage or something. It's like there are ways to maybe make me believe, but like if you're a doctor who's around people who are dying all the time.
I think Stephanie Meyer was just like, I want him to be this old. What is a thing that happened back then that I could say he died from? Oh, perfect. The Spanish influenza.
But it's weird. You're again canceling him.
2 thoughts on his age. One is that I think I read too much fantasy, because when I said he's only 109, I was like, oh, he's only 109, because I've been reading so many like fae books where the guy's like 600 and she's 20. My second thing is the vampire romance, obviously, like it's a big part of it is always that they're like old, and this one's like annoying, and it's an example, like the Vampire Diaries is also annoying on that front, where it's like he's into like teenagers, like and just because he's a teenager bodily, he's not.
No, like maturity wise, he has definitely aged.
Yeah,
and so it's like why would you want
annoying,
right?
Yeah, and
she's so angsty, and it's like you would find that annoying because like we're like this is annoying when we're in our 30s. Like
it's also a modern setting. So it adds to like the concept of teenager has been invented, whatever. It's like, I think like romantasy, like with the fae, like that is a big thing. I think making them at least like a 20-year-old, like an adult helps. Like, I know some people are still like, it's too much, but it's like, okay, get like they're an adult, whatever. Like it's the fantasy. And it's because if you're in like another time and place, like the concepts of childhood and stuff aren't, but like here it's like there's prom, there's school. It's like she's
And
so
he's
clearly a
chaperoning
child.
her through these events because
Yeah.
he takes her to prom. It's weird.
It's creepy. Yeah. Like to me,
Yeah.
the most successful like vampire romance story is like A Discovery of Witches, because he's like a couple hundred years old, but she's A in her 30s and B is like a historian.
Yeah,
So
that makes
they have like this like
Love
connection
that.
because like she's like studied all this stuff that like he lived. And so it's like cool and interesting and different. And this
Yeah.
is just like, you're kind of a pedophile. We're not gonna call it
Yeah.
that because you look young, but you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, even like when you think of like in Wonder Woman, she's kind of immortal, but you don't feel weird that she wants to date Steve Trevor. You know, it's like, oh, you know, because they're both adults.
Yeah. Anywho.
So
But we're rooting for
Edward,
them too. Crazy kids, huh?
I was not,
Kids.
even though I knew that Jacob was not going to work out, I was like, please go with him, please.
I want
I'm
her to find
begging
herself.
you.
I want her to leave town.
That
I want
you know
her
what?
to say, like, hey, Edward, maybe in like 10 years, we'll pick it back up. You know?
I think even as an adult, he's not,
yeah,
he is not the vibe.
yeah, because she's gonna meet other people and realize, oh, he was abusive.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, because you want to go to high school forever.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even someone who hated going to. I mean, I get
going to your basement.
I'm not like I look back at those years fondly of high school and like prom and all that stuff, but I'm not like, oh, if only I could keep
go back.
reliving that. It's like, no, that's great as a past
also,
chapter.
The Cullens had better be in a 5-way contest for valedictorian. Could you imagine if you were repeating high school that many times and you still couldn't understand like limits? Which I think would be me. Like I would
Does not
struggle, but...
Oh, that's so good. All right. So Edward he like wants to meet Charlie formally. Because this is like right before the baseball scene. And Charlie's like cleaning his shotgun and he like closes it, you know, with his big flare. And it's funny. We love Charlie. And Edward very formally comes in and introduces himself and is like, I'm going to take good care of her. And then Charlie proceeds to make fun of Bella in front of her new boyfriend because he's like, yeah, we're going to go play baseball. He's like, good luck with that. So that's great. We love Charlie. And then
he does make sure she has pepper spray.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I do love
like,
that.
Do you have the pepper spray? And she's like, oh my God, Dad. Then it's the baseball scene, the scene that I've really been waiting for this whole time. So vampires love baseball, apparently, because it's America's pastime. Cue the smash/bombshell hit national pastime. Yeah. But they can only play during a thunderstorm because the sound of thunder is so loud that it masks the sound of them hitting home runs and stuff. You know,
this makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I get it. Sure, they're really strong. I mean, if you're in
such a bizarre inclusion.
If it is, but listen, there is some logic. If you're in a stadium and you hear like the crack of the baseball from the bat, it's loud. Now imagine if they weren't on steroids, but rather they were vampires. It would be really fucking loud. But I don't know if it would be as loud as like thunder. Like it's supposed to like sound like thunder, I guess. I don't know. I get it. Sure. It is stupid though.
I do like that for once in these characters' lives, they're trying to do something fun.
That's true.
And it is also another very classic scene.
Iconic. That's what I told Cullen. Like, I was like, oh God, I can't wait for you to get to the baseball scene. So good.
Yeah, that is like the
also
scene.
Only the women are wearing baseball clothes. I'm pretty sure Edward is wearing jeans. At least Emmett's in like a tracksuit.
Yeah, and I think Edward's wearing a jersey, right? Or like
I think he's also in jeans.
It was a weird
Doesn't matter to him.
Yeah, I don't know. But also in the book, Esme, I think she actually sits out and she actually a little bit talks to Bella about how she jumped off a cliff over the grief of losing her infant son. And that's when Carla was working as a doctor and like was treating her and then ended up making her into a vampire. So that's a little bit about Esme.
Because in the book or in the movie, it makes it sound like he converted Edward or whatever, converted, whatever, and then it says then his wife, so it makes it sound like he was married and converted this teenage boy, and then later was like, oh, I guess my wife.
So baseball happens. I have no idea who's on what team.
She gets Rosalie out, and Rosalie's like,
Yeah, Rosalie, listen, I think that was the last straw for Rosalie. Rosalie was like, you didn't eat our fucking Italian food and now you're getting me out. I mean, she did have a good call though, because
Yeah.
Esme did get her out.
And they
So
wouldn't let, she was going to eat it. She's the one who smashed the plate and canceled dinner.
Rosalie refers to Emmett as her monkey man when he like climbs a tree. Hated that. Did not
Yeah.
like that at all. In the book, I actually think that Edward talks about how Rosalie and Emmett are actually married. And I think Alice and Jasper are actually married. And he's like, yeah, we're going to have to go to Rosalie and Emmett's wedding again in a couple years because of, how young they're supposed to be right now. So that's weird. And then trouble shows up. Laurent, Victoria, and James. These are the 3 vampires that have been killing those people around Forks. And
Featuring our other black character.
our other named
This
black
vampire
character.
can be black.
Yeah.
But he also has like white powdered on his face.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Their makeup person did not do a great job.
No.
Sorry.
They love baseball. I think all vampires just love baseball. James is intrigued by Bella though as they're talking, and he's kind of like looking at her, and Edward is like staring like eyes wide intently at him like a psycho. And then the wind blows and James gets a whiff of Bella's scent. And
because Rose is like, they'll be able to smell her across the whatever.
Yeah, they're like, I'd be able to smell her miles away, which is crazy because like, why didn't they immediately smell her? I don't know. I don't know how this works. But anyway, so
it's just the fact that there's a human.
Yeah, he's like, you brought a
there?
snack. And
But
then they're like,
presumably
she's like, damn,
James, Laurent, and Victoria exist around humans at other points. Like, where is Victoria getting her coats if she does not go? Where is she getting her hair done? Like,
yeah,
that's natural, baby.
She's got a gloss or something on there. There is product at the very least. I guess there could be vampire hairdressers. But I don't know. I feel like they have to be around people sometimes and they're acting a little crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. They give me murderous vibes. So like,
I mean, they did murder people on screen.
Well, I mean, like in general, just like anyone they come across, they're just gonna kill them. Yeah, they could not exist like that. So I don't know. But apparently this basically means that like James is going to be hunting Bella and like Edward was protecting her. So like that makes it his most exciting game. And so now the hunt begins. And now we get into the only plot that occurs in the book.
That's so boring.
And it comes literally like, I don't know, 11 hours, probably 11 hours into the book. It's bad. Edward goes on this rant about James being the tracker. And so they make a plan. They go to Bella's house and they're going to pick up her stuff. She has to be mean to Charlie to convince him to let her go because she's going to drive to Phoenix.
She's a child.
This plan, way easier to follow than the one in the book. The one in the book is like impossible to follow. They're like at the house, she's gathering stuff, and she tells Charlie, like, just let me go. I don't want to be here anymore. Whatever.
Because he's like, I just got you back. And she repeats what her mom said when she was leaving him to him, which is ice cold, brutal. She's like, that's all. He's like, we can do more things together. And she's like, that's your life, not me.
That's like the most heartbreaking part of the movie.
I know. It's like really the only time I felt
like Charlie is so like genuine and like you kind of feel like he's like a real person in a way that you don't with the others. And so it's just like this man doesn't know what's going on. And he's not gonna find out what's going on for so long.
Yeah. And so he's just like, oh, he's not even like, oh, he struggles to express him. Like he's like, no, let me find something we can do. It's like,
yeah. He also like, okay, like you can just like sleep on it and go in the morning. And he's also like, did he hurt you? And she's like, no. And then he's like, well, then why are you leaving?
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't stay here. That's why I can't stay here.
This is kind of hopping forward a bit, but then at the end, when Bella's in the hospital after James's attack, and the reason that they come, like that Edward told them is that like Bella tripped. Like if I'm the parents, this plus that, I'm like, that man is abusing you.
Yeah.
Like I am not for a second believing him.
Oh yeah, but Charlie's not even at the hospital. I mean, obviously we'll get to
it.
They
say that she's gonna apologize to him, and I thought that'd be an on-camera moment because that seemed important to me. But
Not
guess
Maybe it's in
important to
that
the
extended
filmmakers.
edition.
Maybe.
That's the one scene.
That's
they
the
added.
only, that should be hopefully in there. Okay, so they're back at the Cullens and they're making Esme and Rosalie decoys by wearing some of Bella's clothes, and they're going to get stationed at Bella's house to keep the scent there. Rosalie is furious. She
She
fucking
is.
hates this girl, and
She's like,
now
she
she has to
should
smell like
die.
her.
She's like, this
Yeah.
ruined everything for everyone. I'm like, oh my God, I hate this girl.
Yeah,
Honestly,
she's
I kind of get Rosalie a little bit in this situation because I'm just like, she's old. Like, that is a 80-year-old woman and she's
yeah.
grumpy. And she doesn't like
Yes.
this like teenager who is her brother dating. She's dating an age appropriate man. They probably have real
True.
mature conversations. And she's just like, who's this fucking bitch? You've barely spoken to her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now I have to like get off my couch and do this.
Well, not even just that. She's like, this has completely threatened our entire family and existence.
Mhm.
And she's probably like, I'm so sick of having to move and pretend that I'm 15, even
Yep.
though I look 37.
Yeah.
And this is where Carlisle says he hates the thought of killing another creature when he's talking
yeah.
about,
And then
which
he's like,
I've ran.
and Bella's family, and
But this guy also is like murders people, and they're like, oh, you know, but it's like he murdered that Santa guy.
yeah,
People cared about him in that community. That people are looking at Charlie weird because they're like, oh, he died and that's the police chief. Like, humans are killed by these people, humans with lives and dreams and former imaginary friends. Like,
Yeah.
yes,
I'm just
former
not a
imaginary
pro-murder
friend.
person.
Again, very bold, very brave. So proud of you.
No, yeah.
So Edward stays in Forks to like, I guess, help like track James. And Alice and Jasper take Bella to Phoenix, and they're just like at this hotel waiting for something. In the book, it's so convoluted. Like, they're gonna go to the airport after this, and I don't know why, but they're at this hotel, and Alice gets a vision of a ballet studio, and Bella is like, "That's one I went to as a kid. It's here in Phoenix." And then Bella gets a call on like from her home phone in Phoenix, and it's her mom's voice being like, "Bella, Bella," like freaking out. And then it's James, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill your mom. Come to that dance studio."
Oh, who did that remind you of? Maybe a guy from a story we told earlier.
Maybe a little
Throwback.
bit. Did that vampire have a name?
No,
Was it James? Oh, I was gonna say that'd be
no.
crazy.
I do
Um,
not expect Stephanie to know a Romani story.
in the book, James tells her, "Okay, you have to sneak away from them tomorrow at the airport." And it's like she has to like do this, like she's being told to do it. In the movie, she like they're like down in the lobby. I don't know what they're about to do, but she sneaks away from them on her own. Like, he's just like, just get here. He's not being like, you need to sneak away from them. You need to do this. Like, she decides to do that.
And this is where she thinks I've like we get the thing from the beginning, like sacrifice
Yeah.
my life for someone else's.
Yeah. And I think like when I first heard that in the book, I don't think I ever like put together in the movie, but in the book, I was like, oh, she's gonna be talking about Edward. And then I was like, oh no, she's actually talking about her mom. Like, she's dying in place of her mom. So, that's a plus, I
Nice.
guess,
Yeah.
instead of it being this
Yeah.
boy that she just met. Sorry, grown ass man that she just
Yeah.
met.
Elderly man.
Elderly, elderly monster man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bella goes to the studio and she's like hearing her mom's voice, and oh, nope, it's just a videotape that he stole from her house.
I hate that. I hate that because her whole big choice, the like only real choice that like she's self-sacrificing, like and then it's just a trick, and then she's not dying in place of anyone, and that's what you led me with was
Yep,
that this girl's gonna sacrifice herself. Like, that's how this
for her
story
mom.
opened.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, that is cheap, that is lazy. I want a refund. I want
Also,
Voodoo
like,
to refund me.
it's not like a character moment for her because like none of her development in this movie has changed what choice she would make in that situation.
Yeah.
Like, the Bella we met at the
She
beginning would have chosen the
developed-
same thing.
I was say she developed in this movie.
That's what I'm saying, is like she
Yeah.
should have. But it's
Yeah.
not even like she like learned bravery or anything in this movie. Like, she got nowhere. She would have made that choice
Regardless.
and it won.
Yeah. Again, it would make more sense like if it was like Charlie, because she has a more awkward relationship with him And so it's like, oh, I've grown to care about my dad so much that I would die for him.
Yeah. Or if it was just like confronting a fear. I don't know. Public speaking.
But the fact that they have to go back to Phoenix and do all this hullabaloo is just so stupid.
Also, ballet studio?
I thought she was clumsy.
Clumsy, never covered.
That's why in the video that they show in the movie, or like you can hear it, the little girl version of Bella is like, Mom, I suck. You know, so like clearly she didn't go through with ballet also, because she sucked.
Does James appear in the mirrors?
Yes.
But then later Edward doesn't appear in the reflection, right? When they're dancing in the pool.
Oh,
I thought that's what I thought, because the way it was shot, I thought they're trying to say that, but I honestly couldn't make it out. So I guess vampires just appear in mirrors here.
Yes. Yeah, because they definitely appeared in the mirror.
Or that's why their makeup is also bad, is because they're just kind of, can't see it.
Yeah, they can't see themselves. Okay, so this is where James starts beating the shit out of Bella, and he like bites her, and she's wigging out, because we also learn earlier that they're like venomous. In the book, Alice tells her that when they're like at the hotel, but I think Edward tells her that here in the movie. And then Edward shows up, he's beating up James, Bella's fighting for her life, and Carlisle, Jasper, Emmett, and Alice show up to help Edward, and like they pull Edward away from James. It's like, you have to go save your girl. And then Jasper and Emmett like start to pull James. They're gonna like rip him apart, but Alice gets to rip off his head, and I appreciated that.
I just love the jump that she does.
She's like, zoop,
and I also love that they like call her over. They're like, Alice, like they couldn't rip off his head. She gotta do it.
They're like, we'll hold him down. You get to do the fun part.
Yeah. But then, okay, so she jumps basically so that like her legs are on his shoulders, and then she's holding the head, and then she pulls the head off.
She has no support. Yep.
Yeah, is then gone. Does she just like fall off onto her back? I guess she's a vampire.
Or maybe they. True. She probably does like a cool backflip. That's what I'm picturing.
That would be cool.
Or like maybe they just like they drop the body and she just goes forward with the body.
Yeah.
And then she like does a front tumble and she lands and she gets a 10.
I just wish we could have seen that. Maybe that's in the extended cut too.
I hope so. Oh my God. Okay, maybe you do want to see this but I just want to see the extended stuff. Yeah. I don't have to go through this again. Then Edward is over there sucking out the venom from Bella's arm.
Because Carlisle won't do it. Like he knows that he's like, Edward, you have to control yourself and do it. But he doesn't even like, it's like he could be like, if you love her, you should be able to do this. It's just like, he's like, you got to do it.
I wonder if it's like a possession thing, because he basically like, claims her. Like they're like, because Carlisle says like, she's with Edward, we're family now. And so like, if she's with him, no one else can touch her. Because that's also common in vampire lore.
He also has to decide whether he's going to let her become a vampire or suck out the venom so she doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Which I thought was very interesting, that Bella does not have agency in that choice, and her agency choice to sacrifice herself was actually just like a trick. So
so she has zero agency.
And in the fight, she doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
She just gets beaten up.
She gets beaten up.
Which is okay. Yeah, she's just, they're super powered. She's just a girl, like what is she supposed to do?
But you wish she would like think of something.
Yeah, do something clever.
Like obviously she's not gonna like fight, and that's
well, she uses her pepper spray.
But that's okay. Here's a world building issue. Wow. But like the vampires are too OP. They're too, I hate to use Mary Sue because I think it's kind of meaningless at this point in discourse, but like a thing with a lot of powers should have a weakness, right? And that's classic. Vampires have a lot of powers, but they have these weaknesses. And it's like so there's like nothing she can do that's clever. She can't like do a word trick of like, are they invited in? Like that whole thing.
Because
like,
it's not about her saving herself. So I've been editing the Cinderella episode, and we talk about how, there's actually a lot of complexity with Cinderella's position, but Bella's story is literally about a prince coming to save her.
Yeah.
Like it's about
Bella is
so helpless.
The feminist movement. Like she has rights that like Cinderella does not, like so it's like they have to disempower her. Like
like the whole part of the romance is that she's like weak and stuff, and that like
Yeah.
he can protect her, and like that's like the whole thing.
Not super like appealing in a main character.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because they don't even go with, oh, she's like physically weak, but she's smart, or she's like kind, or
Right.
like charismatic. Like she doesn't have any strengths. She can't even
Yeah, like I
dance.
thought they did like a good job with that in like, you know, the most recent Hunger Games movie, like versus Katniss. Like Lucy Gray is not the same girl, but like she's got strengths and opinions and thoughts and stuff, and Bella's just kind of like here and she doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he does end up sucking out the venom, but he struggles to stop, and Bella's life is flashing before her eyes. And we're like, this bitch dead. Oh my fucking God, she
This
fucking
she fucking
dead.
dead.
Miss
This is
Bella.
an abstinence metaphor thing, because they would always say like you should never ask how far is too far, because you shouldn't, like, it'd be like carrying the girl over a cliff and like being like, well, how close to the edge can I get before I drop her? It's like you shouldn't even be carrying them over the cliff. And so that's the whole edging concept of the Twilight as an abstinence metaphor, is because it's not just like, oh, like they're constantly in these situations that are semi-sexual or semi, it's not just like we're avoiding those situations,
Yeah.
which technically if you're shooting for an abstinence thing is like a smarter long-term plan of like, let's not flirt with putting our, like, we're just gonna avoid that. But here it's all very much about testing yourself in those moments, and I
Yeah.
really dislike that. It's like the how far, it's like the fuck me in the ass because I love Jesus thing, the like how far can you get before it doesn't count? And it's just
Yeah.
it's already the, like, I have very mixed negative feelings about the chastity stuff, but like this is the worst version of it.
Yeah, it's all very troubling. I think it gets more troubling when she wakes up in the hospital. Her mom is there. Her mom's like, "Oh my God, he doesn't leave." Like it's so sweet. And like in the book, Renee is like skeptical. She's like, "Yeah, he doesn't leave." Like
He
she's
doesn't
not
leave. He
into
pulled you
him.
out of the city. He said that you tripped down the stairs. Like these are bad
She and
parents.
she literally is like, "Oh yeah, I believe that this happened, not he threw you out a fucking window," you know? Like, and in the
Yeah.
book, Edward actually tells her, like, she wakes up and Edward's there and her mom isn't there yet. And he tells her, like, this is the story we told them, go with it. It's
Oh, do not
fucked
like
up.
that.
It's fucked up. So yeah, that happened.
Also,
And
he
then her
was
mom,
pretending to sleep, so listening to their whole conversation, which is not really covered
I hate
because he
that.
doesn't sleep.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
So her mom also tells her, like, yeah, Edward and Carlisle flew to Phoenix to convince you to come back to Forks. And then that whole accident happened. And also in the book, he does tell her that she could also commit insurance fraud because apparently to make their story believable, Alice like went on like a rampage and like broke some shit and broke the window. And he's like, yeah, you could probably sue the hotel if you wanted to. That's how convincing it was. And I was like, wow. So he's like asking her to commit insurance fraud. I love that.
He's a bad
Then
boy. He's a predator.
And then, so in the movie, when like her mom leaves the room, Edward like wakes up, you know. I guess he's like trying to tell her, like, maybe we shouldn't be together. Like, I'm sorry, put you in danger. He's like agonizing, like, over himself, not over her.
Yeah.
Also, in the book, she's fucked up. Like, she apparently has like 50 broken bones, bruises all over her body. Like, she's on like hella IV. She's got oxygen tubes. Like, it's not good for her. He kind of says, like, oh, you know what? Like, maybe you should go to Jacksonville and, you know, be there. And she's like, but then you can't go there because you're not gonna be able to go out in the sunlight. You're gonna sit in a basement all day. And I'm like, ha, they don't have basements in Florida.
Yeah.
And so he's basically like, well, I'm gonna stay in Forks. And then she's like, no, you can't leave me. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, this is codependency.
This is so bad.
Like,
Also, she should be able to live in the city and not date him.
also, where are the healthcare providers? Where are they like, yeah, so they say that she fell out a window. That's weird because the windows in this hotel are very strong.
Yeah.
We've talked about, I'm sure we've talked about my broken leg at some point in our
We
podcasting
absolutely
journey.
have.
But like when they were very, I twisted it in a seatbelt getting out of the car because my backpack was heavy, and they were very insistent that in implying that my mom had twisted my leg. And that was not the case. And then when they asked me to explain, you know, as you can tell from the length of our episodes, I was a very verbose child. And I was like, and they were trying to get me to shut up because it's taking a long time to tell the story. And my mom was like, you know what? You could listen. Like, you accuse me of doing this to my kid, listen to him
fucking listen to what he has to say.
But it's also like they actually were very bad in that situation, but it is their job to also ask those questions.
Because also, okay, so regardless of like the healthcare providers, her mom knows why she left. Because Charlie told her, like, yeah, that Edward kid made her upset.
It's just like,
and she fucking
that's
bounced.
not a man who I would trust.
And then that kid and his dad, who's suspiciously young, who we know that's adopted and whatever, but still, it's weird. And
they're incestuous siblings.
They went to Phoenix to get her back for me. And it's like, you're a police officer, do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's troubling. So that happens. Edward kisses her on the forehead, and then we're back in Forks. So Edward's sitting at the table with Charlie at the Swan household. And Bella comes down the stairs in her prom dress, and they're watching her. And she is wearing classic 2009 outfit. She's got her prom dress. She's got some leggings, like some like capri leggings. She's wearing Converse, and of course her leg pads. Who
says I can't wear my Converse?
Converse with my dress.
Did that song come out before or after this movie?
I think they are contemporaries. Let me double check. I need to know now. God, what's the song called?
La La Land
by
Demi Lovato.
Yeah.
As sung on Sunny with a Chance, I believe.
Yes.
She did not sing that.
Oh my God, it came out in 2008.
Wow. Wow. What a zeitgeist moment for Demi.
So great. So they're going to prom. Now, here's something that I need to explain. In the book, I don't even know how she could be this oblivious, but Bella apparently has no idea they're going to prom. Alice lent her a dress and dolled her up. Edward picks her up and he's in a tux, and she's like, oh my God, we're going to prom. And it's so fucking dumb.
No.
So that's like a whole sequence. And I'm like, I have 40 minutes left in this book. Why? Oh, because we spend 10 minutes of it going on this wild charade as if she doesn't know she's going to prom. And then she's like, oh, wow, I was so silly to think that, like, how could I not realize it? Yeah. Anyway. And then when they're on the way to prom, Charlie like either calls Edward directly or calls Bella, and Edward just picks up because, you know, controlling. And apparently the Tyler guy who almost killed her with his van, who promised that he would take her to prom, is at her house ready to take her to prom. And Edward's like, you should need to tell him that there's been a miscommunication and sorry we ruined his night. Click. So
that sucks.
Happens. This is so stupid. Like,
that's also, again, it's not like I was a Tyler stan.
No.
But it's also like, let them know you're not going.
Yeah, it's just all sorts of fucked. So let's get back to the movie and this prom. Let's wrap this up. Jacob is outside the school. He just emerges from the forest and he's wearing a little outfit, you know, with his nasty wig. And he brings a message from his dad to Bella, which is weird. But his dad paid him $20, so $20 is $20. And the message is, break up with your boyfriend. And we'll be watching you.
First half was not incorrect.
It's literally like the best advice she's been given. But you know, maybe it should have been given to her in a different way and maybe she would have listened to it. Then Jacob and Edward stare passionately furious at each other. And then Edward goes, I leave you for 5 seconds and the wolves descend. Because next movie, wolves.
Comedy.
They're at prom. Bella sees all her friends who look very happy, you know. And in the book, so going back to the whole point where Cullen was like, she is so rude to these people. In the book, she literally says, like, I see all these faces of people whose names I remember. Like, that's the gist of the sentence. And I was like, okay, so you're telling me Twilight is one girl's journey to remember her classmates' names? Love that.
Because she is very like, I don't remember their names, which is
so aloof about it. Yeah.
Again, fair when you meet new people, but it's not like, oh, fuck, I don't remember her name. It's like, I could not be bothered.
I could not be bothered to learn her name. And it's literally April. And I've known her since September. Like, Yeah, it's fucking crazy. But back to the movie. Edward and Bella go outside to the gazebo and slow dance in private to Flightless Bird, American Mouth, which is truly a beautiful song.
It is
Um,
very Hilary Duff Cinderella story core.
I cannot comment on that because it's been a long time since I've seen that movie. So they're dancing, but like she's like on top of his feet because, again, she's so clumsy,
Clumsy.
she's almost handicapped.
I'm
Again,
screaming.
a quote from the book. And so Bella's like reasoning with Edward, being like, you should make me into a vampire. I'm getting older. He's like, can't you just like
Mm,
enjoy prom? Like, I don't want you to miss all these moments of being a human, aka being a child. And he's like, you know what? You really want it. You fucking want it. And he's like leaning into her neck. And then he just kisses her neck, which is gross. I hated it. And then she doesn't get turned into a vampire and they keep dancing. But then, uh-oh, they're being watched from a window. And then it turns out it's Victoria. And she's like, takes her hair out of the bun. She's like smiling, sauntering down the staircase. She's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get revenge. However, this version of Victoria will never get the revenge that she seeks because she will inevitably be replaced by Bryce Dallas Howard. And that's the end of Twilight.
yeah. Wow. They did almost replace
Jacob.
Jacob. They
Oh,
were worried he
really?
wasn't hot enough, I think.
Yeah, or
Shark
like big
Boy.
enough.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What a film. Something I feel I have to bring up because it's shown all around us. Great headband content in this film. I bought a lot of headbands after this movie came out, and they
Uh-huh.
did not look the same on me. They were a little bit more
Yeah.
giving Jessica, which is not a great headband, but like the Kristen
Mm-hmm.
Stewart headbands throughout were pretty fantastic. I think it's probably a wig. That's probably not her hair, but at the time I did not know that.
I
Mm.
don't know if this one is a wig. I want to say either 2 or 3 it's a wig because she had her hair really short for something
Apparently,
else.
most movies it's a wig because most people do not have the thickness of hair that they like
Yeah.
try to convince us that they have.
Yeah.
No, this I tried headbands for a long time and they don't look right on me, but they look great in
No.
this movie.
So yeah, that was Twilight. Do we root for our
Mm.
protagonist?
No.
Is Bella the protagonist? Does she have a
Yes.
desire?
I
Oh,
root for Bella in the way that I would like for her to leave this all behind.
yes.
I
Yeah,
don't think it's
same.
necessarily bad that she doesn't have like a huge desire or like a ton of agency when you just look at it in the context of her being like a teenage girl. But for like, I root for this to be a story that she remembers from high school. Like, oh, that weird dude I dated in high school. And now I'm like off doing whatever it is I like doing that I've
Yeah.
learned over the years that I've grown into.
Yeah, I do like in the book I really hate her, but I also feel like no one should have to go through what she's gonna go through by being a vampire. Like similar to like I'm not a Kim stan, but I was very upset when Kanye was doing crazy stuff to her. Like it's like and then in the movie I think she's more sympathetic, like she's nice, she doesn't like hate people for no reason.
Mhm.
But I do again I root for her in that this is like Peter Pan if Wendy moves to Neverland. Like Wendy has to
Mm,
come back and realize that he's like weird and immature, and she has to come back and like have her nice adult life, and she can remember that she had to go on this magical journey. And but at least Neverland is way more pleasant than this vampire world. So it's like I just wish that she could leave this all behind. Like it's
yeah.
like watching a horror movie that doesn't realize it's a horror movie, and you're like, this girl, like she's never gonna escape from this Nazi over the Alps with her family. Like she's just gonna be wed to him eternally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Eternally. Not even death.
And they just never really like talk, but I do root for her because I want her to like wake up. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, she never does. Spoiler alert for the remainder of the
I have
series.
seen Breaking Dawn Part 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I want her and Charlie to just live a quiet life until she graduates high school. She goes to like Washington State, moves to
Yeah.
Seattle,
Comes
like
out. Yeah.
comes out. Yeah. Yeah.
opens
I
a headband line
love that for her.
because
Or a
we don't know
cactus
what her
store.
dream is. Like we have no idea what she
She
wants
has
to
no
do.
dream. Like throughout this
Yeah.
whole series, like she has no desire except for to be with Edward. And to do that, she thinks that she needs to become a vampire.
And it's not even, to use the Cinderella comparison, it's not even oh, I want to escape a bad situation. I dream of happiness. It's not even that general want,
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like she doesn't even articulate, oh, I would like to no longer be like having to sacrifice for other people's happiness. Because at the end of the day, this is a story where she will then constantly have to sacrifice for other people's happiness.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So
do we ship Bella and Edward?
shipping Bella and
No.
Edward. Bedward.
No.
I do not.
Back. I'm holding my cross up.
Yeah.
Get away from that
they have
teenage
nothing
girl,
in
you
common.
109-year-old man.
They have nothing in common. He's grooming her. And the vampires, of course, find it fine because they're like, yeah, well, we're used to like dating people who are a lot younger, but it's also like, maybe you should be dating a child, maybe like a 20 something.
Like, you know, like at this point, like if Emmett was turned like 5 or 10 years after Rosalie, like they were all turned like pretty close to each other. If Jasper was the last and he was a Confederate soldier.
Also, why does he keep turning teenagers?
Jackson was a Confederate soldier and he was turned during the war, but he joined them later. So he was
a recent,
that doesn't make timeline.
Because he's eaten people before. Okay. Because he struggled in front of Bella, and I was like, how many racially motivated murders has this man done?
I don't know what I was gonna say, but I'm laughing because it's uncomfortable because it's probably true.
But like, you know, the age difference between like the other ones are not that strong. Like it's like when you're like a 40-year-old dating a 60-year-old, it's very different than like a 40-year-old dating a 17-year-old.
I don't know.
At this point, like Rosalie and Emmett, that's a pretty fine couple. Like,
well, Rosalie was turned in like the 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
And he would have been turned in Edward. When was Spanish flu?
Edward was like 1911, I think.
Okay, so that's like a 30-something year difference.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
So
it's creepy.
But I don't think Rosalie was a child. I think Rosalie was like 19 or 20 when she was.
And she still has to go to high school.
Yeah, right. I think it's because they all
horror.
It's terrible. Also, they have to go to high school when they had like never been to high school, like in the same way.
Yeah.
Because high school didn't like exist in the same way. Like what you would leave school after like maybe 9th grade, you'd either go work or maybe go to like a higher school, then maybe to college. Like it wasn't the same.
No.
Same thing with Jackson. Like he went through 3rd grade in a schoolhouse and then he went to the war.
Yeah.
Jasper, not Jackson. Jackson Rathbone is his name. Okay, antagonist. James randomly shows up at the end. In the book, he's like never there until the very end, but at least in the movie, they like trail them throughout, which I was like smart. But they suck. They all suck.
Boring.
Boo. Mm-hmm. Was that your fantasy? No. Oh, I thought we were all going to say it at the same time.
Oh yeah, no.
No, I mean, no. Not really.
There's something nostalgic about it, and I like making fun of it.
I enjoy it. I still enjoy it. It's awful. And really when you like start to dissect it over a 3-hour podcast, you're like, huh. Mm-hmm. But I did like it at the time. But vampires were never like, I never wanted to be a vampire.
Right.
And especially at like 17. Like I was like, wait until I'm like 25 and hot. Then maybe a vampire, but like not right now. No. I want it to be like a fairy or a witch.
Preferable. Yeah.
Yeah. I still want to be a witch.
So like I watched True Blood when it was coming out, and granted, I probably wasn't old enough to be watching it, but I was so that came out, I think 2008. So like probably right before the movie came out. And so like I had been watching that, and that's very sexy. And like I think I probably watched more of that than I did Twilight before like I actually got into Twilight, like watching it. I had those vampires and I'm like, that's cool stuff. Like it's really interesting and it's like salacious. And this is like such a worse version of a vampire story. And like
I mean, I was a big like Buffy person, which is like a YA vampire. And even that is like it's
more salacious and it's more interesting.
And it's also, and like, and then you get into like Angel and you're asking like a lot of questions about like what it means to be the vampire, like what it means to be that old and everything. And so like, that's more interesting.
There's just more, I don't want to necessarily say it's just because like, oh, that's a series and it went longer. I don't think so. I think they just had more to say in that series, in both series.
Yeah, it's a no for me, babes.
This has nothing to say except for you shouldn't have sex before marriage. And
And
any man that you encounter will be insatiable and want to kill you.
And that's
maybe Native Americans are cursed. It's not my fantasy. It is better than the book. It is much more enjoyable than the book. But even as I love vampires as antagonists, I think they're like scary in like a fun, salacious way. This has nothing to say about anything. It's so boring. It's so like milk toast. It's like not even good conservative propaganda. Like I hate it and I'm sorry, I really wanted to come with an open mind because lately my mantra is pouring out for Stephanie. People know how to say my name now, but it is a poison apple.
All right. Well,
Julia, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I love talking about Twilight.
Well,
I hope you watch and enjoy the other films more. They're a little better, I think.
I agree. They're much more watchable, and I think like there's more things happening that could be considered interesting.
Yeah, you start getting like plots that exist throughout the whole movie instead of just like the last 10%.
Yes. And
which is kind of nice.
Yeah, exactly. So
I like a plot.
Yeah.
I'll come out and say that.
So many brave takes.
No, everyone's just really putting themselves out there.
Proud of us. Really proud of us. So you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at NotMyFantasyPod. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello, you should
smash that like button.
Smash like button and subscribe to the channel so you get notified whenever we post a new video. We are going to be trying to do these weekly. Yeah. And also, we did Twilight, but next week, actually, I have no idea what we're talking about.
So it's Supernatural Romance Month.
No idea what the topic is because I've never seen this film.
Okay, so our next movie is Beautiful Creatures.
I'm also not reading the book. I refuse.
I'm not reading the book, and I have not seen it. But we will be talking about witchcraft in the American South.
Ooh. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And again, Julia, thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks for watching Twilight. Finally.
Yeah.
Yay.
Have a good week, spider monkeys.
Oh, no.
On that note.
How do I stop?
Stop it.